heard from the alder that we're not to expect him, have we?
I have not received anything from Alder Revere.
So I will call to order the Finance Committee meeting of Monday, September 13th, 2021, and ask staff to call the roll.
Council President Abbas.
Present.
Alder Carter.
Present.
Alder Furman.
Present.
Alder Figueroa Cole.
Present.
Alder Curry.
Here.
Looks like Alder Revere is coming into the meeting. Alder Revere, we're taking a roll.
I'm here.
Thank you, Alder Revere. Mary of Quorum.
Thank you. Can we have the meeting instructions, please?
All right. Welcome to our virtual meeting. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. Members of the committee, if you're able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you're able, please activate your video when you're speaking. In this meeting, panelists have the ability to mute and unmute themselves. Panelists also have the ability to add pronouns after their names if they choose. Please do not alter the current naming convention. Please simply add text after your name. Please use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions, or request a roll call vote. Staff, please use the raise hand feature when you're asked a question. The chair will do their best to call on committee members in the order in which hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. Staff will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the committee, please send it to the email listed on today's agenda. Mayor, the floor is yours.
Thank you. We only have public comment on specific items. So our next item is disclosures and recusals. Are there any disclosures or recusals on any of the items on today's agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. We have registrants. So the first two items, 1 and 2, are appointment hearings. We have registrants on 9 and 19 and 21. Are there other items that alders would like removed from the consent agenda? President Abbas.
Can we take the agenda item number 18 also remove from consent agenda, please?
Item 18. All right, are there any other items that members of the Finance Committee wish to have removed from the consent agenda? All right, so we will be separating items 1, 2, 9, 18, 19, and 21. And all other items will be on the consent agenda. Alder Carter.
A quick question for item 6.
We'll separate item 6 for a question.
Okay, thanks.
Are there any other items for separation from the consent agenda? All right, so separated from the consent agenda are items 1, 2, 6, 9, 18, 19, and 21. On the balance of the agenda, President Abbas?
Move motion to approve the consent agenda.
Unreadiness.
Yes.
Mayor, go ahead and put 6 back on. I read it differently. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right, so President Abbas, a motion that includes item 6 on the consent agenda.
Yes, move motion to add also agenda item number 6 as a part of consent agenda.
Is there a second on the consent agenda?
Second.
Thank you, Alder Figueroa Cole. So it's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda with the exceptions of items 1, 2, 9, 18, 19, and 21. Is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor of the consent agenda? Seeing no objection, we'll record a unanimous vote in favor of the consent agenda. Item 1 is submitting the appointment of Norman Davis for confirmation of a 5-year term as the Civil Rights Director. President Abbas, a motion, please.
Move motion to appoint Norman D. Davis for confirmation of a 5-year term as the Civil Rights Director.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. I believe that Norm is with us. If anyone has questions for him, are there any questions for Norm? Seeing none, is there any objection to recording unanimous vote in favor? Seeing no objection, we'll record a unanimous vote in favor. And Norm, we will move you on to the council. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Right. Item 2 is submitting the appointment of Mary Beth Witzel-Bell for confirmation of a 5-year term as the city clerk. And not that I was not excited about Norm, but I am very excited to submit to you this nomination. President Abbas, a motion, please.
Yes, move motion to for the appointment of Mary Beth Witzel-Bell for confirmation of 5-year term as the city clerk.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's moved and seconded. I believe that Mary Beth is with us. Does anyone have questions for Mary Beth? Seeing no questions, is there any objection to recording an enthusiastic unanimous vote in favor? Seeing no objection, we will record a unanimous vote in favor. Congratulations, Mary Beth. We are passing you on to the full council.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, then that brings us to item 9, which is Legistar 67119, supporting Madison Metro's grant application to the Federal Transit Administration for work on the Metro Rapid Green Line. We have one registrant, Bob Schaefer from District 17, wishing to speak.
Yes, Madam Mayor and the rest of the council, I appreciate the opportunity to address you. In my opinion, I think that this is a premature act or action. I think that what I read on it, it was there to help the impoverished areas and low income. And I want to remind the council and the mayor that many of the low income people work on jobs that either begin or end at times that the current metro system is not running. And so therefore, I'm not sure how much of an advantage that this system is going to add to that group. The other aspect is that the meetings that I've been to relating to BRT, that there's been no presentation in terms of what the expected ridership is and that it would be greater. I know that on the East Washington one, that the current local buses have been removed from service on that East Washington corridor, and that I've not seen any method of efficiently transferring riders from the local buses to bus rapid transit on that corridor. I don't know exactly how that's all going to take place. I think that in the current BRT system, there, in my opinion, are many unanswered questions, and that the plan does not seem to cover it. And again, that if we look for a north-south, I don't see in any of the plans for a transfer from a north-south to an east-west efficiently. And so I think that there's a lot more to do in the planning and in gathering the information to support that. So I think that at this point in time, going to the Federal Transportation Commission with something, I think that there's no data that is going to be supportive of that effort. So I think that I would recommend postponing this until a later date as to when we can have more assurance that this is going to be something that works. Thank you.
There are questions for our registrant? Seeing none, President Abbas, a motion, please.
Motion to accept the grant.
No, we're not accepting it yet. Unfortunately, we're supporting the application thereof. So I think just move approval.
Move approval then.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you, Alder Carter. Are there any questions or is there any discussion? President Abbas?
Yeah, thank you. Just a quick question, especially about the green line and this, especially this is attached with the poverty. I'm just curious, and I saw in resolution there's specific dates, but I'm really curious to know about the green line with this particular money. What exactly areas on the north side it's going to be touched? I saw green line have 2 impacted, but still we as a north side resident, we are not sure where the BRT is going to end up. So I'm just curious if you could give a little bit update.
Sure. So actually this work would fund the definitive direction of that. So the short answer is we don't know for sure yet where the alignment is and where the endpoints are. This grant would help us bring on a consultant to do the work necessary to completely define what that north-south route will be, so that we can answer that question and move forward with design from there. So this grant would be for the planning work necessary to define the alignment and the environmental work to clear, so that we can move forward with the design.
And also with this grant is also communication and outreach is also part of it.
Yeah. So it's a planning grant, so it would include all of that.
So there will be a separate process beside what process we are doing, there will be an additional process for outreach, talking to residents, correct?
Yes. So this would be targeted specifically just to that corridor and include all of that outreach work. Yes.
And if I'm not wrong, this money is, as you mentioned, just to rephrase it, this is for planning process. It's not for buying electric buses or it's not for the hard cost.
Exactly.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Abbas. Alder Carter, questions for staff?
Yeah, Justin, just a quick question I know that there's going to be some reconstruction of Park Street specifically, but I'm sure some reconstruction on the north side too. Is that going to be in Metro's budget, or is that something that there's going to be a community engagement on along with this grant? Or is this strictly regarding the alignment and possibly transfers?
This grant, the work funded by this grant could help us answer some of those questions. As you mentioned, Park Street likely needs a reconstruction or serious work on it. We don't know exactly how that would be combined or not combined with the BRT project and how that might move forward. But this work funded by the grant would help us answer that question.
Okay, thank you. Keep us posted.
Alder Wahilahe, questions? Alder, you may need to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Justin, if you could walk us through the process when we heard about the BRT and the first project is east and west, and the north and south is something in the long run, not something in the near future. But what I'm wondering is, what is the alignment in this proposal to for the north and south in terms of the poverty for the BRT Green Line?
So, the north-south, we know that the north-south BRT has been envisioned for a while, and we've always planned to move forward with it. Again, I think we know it would stretch roughly from Northport Drive to Fitch Hatchery Road. We just don't know the exact streets it will take in between, and exactly where the endpoints are. And this, we need to do a lot of analysis around, the streets themselves, the ridership opportunities. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to make a final determination on that. And so this grant is simply to do that work so that we can have a more well-defined project to move forward with from that point.
Madam Mayor, if I can follow up, will that expedite the process to have BRT in North and South? Should this proposal goes through?
It certainly could. I think this grant opportunity came up and was uniquely well suited for this corridor, just based on what the grant was trying to seek, and we think we're going to be successful with this. And so certainly bringing this money in a little bit sooner than we had previously anticipated could help us move the project forward a little faster than we anticipated previously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Are there other questions for staff? Right. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor of item 9? Seeing no objection, we'll record a unanimous vote in favor of item 9. And we will move on to item 18, which is Legistar 67111, authorizing a 3-year competitively selective agreement with Microsoft. So President Abbas, a motion first, I think.
Move motion to authorize a 3-year contract with CDW Government LLC.
A second, please. Thank you. President Abbas, you had questions?
Yeah, probably it's a good opportunity to get a quick update about the upgrades we will get through this contract, especially Microsoft Teams. So that's pretty much, I just want to get a quick update what upgrades are included with this particular contract.
Alder, I'm not sure who from IT is here. But if you are here and can speak to this item, please raise your hand and or turn your camera on.
And if there's nobody here, Madam Mayor, I can send an email to Sarah and then share. Just want to make sure council knows what upgrades are happening.
Yeah, I appreciate that, President Moss. I don't see Sarah here, so I think we'll have to get that question answered in another venue. So the motion is to approve. Are there any other questions or discussion? If not, is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor? Seeing no objection, we'll record a unanimous vote in favor. Brings us to item 19. We have registrants on this item. So item 19 is Legistar 66091, a resolution regarding wage parity. First registrant is Dan Rolfs from District 6, representing MIPSI, to be followed by Neil Rainford.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. You have a long agenda, so I'll try to keep my comments short. First, thank you for your service, all of you. Public service is no joke, and I appreciate the time that you give to this and all other items. Second, I'm here on behalf of the Madison Professional and Supervisory Employee Association as a member of the Greater Coalition of General Municipal Employees, urging your support for the alternate resolution that moves forward wage parity a little bit faster than we had previously seen it. This alternate represents another compromise on general municipal employees as we attempt to continue to move towards wage parity. We believe this recognizes both the needs of employees as well as the needs of the city to balance its budget. So I would appreciate additional support for the alternate as presented for this resolution. Again, thank you for your service, and yield the balance of my time.
Our next registrant is Neil Rainford, Nob Hill Road, representing Local 6000, to be followed by Tyson Vitale.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the committee, for the opportunity to address you this evening and for your service. Just echoing a little bit of what Dan shared on behalf of Local 6000, the city's general municipal employees. I'm here to speak on behalf of the alternate resolution regarding this item, and to request your support for it. With regard to a little more detail about the "be it further resolved" paragraph that determines how the general municipal employees would be treated should other municipal employees receive greater increases. I just wanted to share that that's the precise language that the parties agreed to use in 2015 when we were in a similar but less disparate situation. And so there's a history of working together around the development of that language with the Labor Relations Department, the associations, and the elected officials at that point. And so for that reason, we hope that you will find that amenable and support that as it goes forward. And with that, I will say thank you and see the rest of my time as well.
Our next registrant is Tyson Vitale of District 16, to be followed. Oh, that's our last speaker.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, I am in support of this alternate. I think that we should be living by our values as a city and ensuring that our employees are able to negotiate their wages and have the same, have the same parity as other employees do that are able to. Yeah, that's it. Thank you. I am in support of this.
All right. Are there questions for any of our registrants? Alder Furman.
Thank you, Mayor. My first question would be for Neil.
Do we have Neil back, please?
Yes, I'm back.
Go ahead, Alder.
Hi, Neil. Nice to see you again. I'm going to ask you the same question that I asked you at the Committee on Employee Relations and see if you have an answer this time, if you've been able to get an answer. If given the choice between layoffs or furloughs or a raise for employees, is there a preference of the labor group on either direction?
So with regard to the question that you raise, I think, first of all, it's a question that is based on false premises, but I would like to point out that any effort to fund parts of the city's operation at the expense of employees across wage equity is in and of itself an approach that's really fraught with trouble. I think we're all aware that inflation, according to July's increase in the CPI here in the Midwest, is about 5.8 or 5.9% right now. And while that might be somewhat higher than the expected amount will be for the entire year, there is no question that inflation is increasing rapidly, and that employees are suffering a real reduction in their capacity to purchase the goods and services they need to support their family, and asking the city's municipal employees to do with less on an ongoing basis is deeply troubling, and then posing the question, that if you don't do with less, then some of you will be laid off, is in and of itself an approach that I think is deeply troubling. It's one that suggests that we're not prioritizing the services that we actually can afford, and with the income and the resources that we actually have. And instead, what we're saying is we'd like you, the employees, to give out of your pockets to make up for the resources or for the programs and the purchases that we can't afford. But we'd like you to help us afford them. So that would be, what I would share with regard to that issue.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question for Dan.
Go ahead, Alder.
Dan, same question. We have a structural deficit in our budget. We continue to have a structural deficit. We'll likely continue to have a structural deficit every year. If we are having to make a choice as a city of raises or which would require furloughs or layoffs or no raises at all, is there a position that the employees that you're representing would have on that?
Thank you for the question. I would echo Neil's comments and add that these are policy choices. All of the things that we do as a city, I include both employees, but in particular policymakers, are choices. And one of the things that I think about when, I gave this question some extensive thought after our meeting on the Committee on Employee Relations. And what I think about is not so much wages versus layoffs or furloughs, but services. What this really boils down to in my book is what are the services that the city wants to provide. And there are many things that you as policymakers, I believe, have for goals. Everything from addressing homelessness to having buildings inspected to having trash picked up and roads plowed and all of those things. In my time with the city, I've been here nearly 17 years. I remember one year where there was not a shortfall, a deficit, a direction from the mayor at that time that included something about cuts for wages or cuts to the way that employees are hired, and what I think, the way that the services are provided. And I think what that really says to me is just a matter of priorities. So as policymakers, I think there's a point that putting money towards projects is your right. That's your responsibility as a policymaker. So whatever those things may be, like I said, trash pickup, BRT, libraries, not to say that any of those things are better or worse than others. However, when you start to add those services and add to those projects, bearing in mind that there's a need to staff those things, and staffing comes from a mix of having reasonable pay and benefits and being able to recruit and retain. So, I think I understand where you're coming from with your question, but the way that I've started to sort of think about this is it's great to sort of put it back on the employees, but I think that also needs to go back to policymakers. I say that respectfully as somebody who obviously is in your employ as well, but I think that actually needs to go back on policymakers as well to think about what are the services that we as a city want to provide. And I multiple anecdotes, I'll try to keep them brief, but one of them that I think about is one of the folks in our coalition, when they were hired, they were one of 100 employees one of 100 applicants for their position. They've been here for around a decade, and they now sit on hiring committees that are looking to hire employees in their same spot. They recently advertised for 2 positions, very similar to the one that they started in. And between those 2 positions combined, there were 15 applicants. Not 200, not 150, not even 100, 15 applicants. So we are having difficulty actually finding people to do the work that's necessary for the city. I also think about things like the priorities that I've heard repeatedly as a staff person, dealing with issues of homelessness, dealing with issues of transit, dealing with issues of land use, environmental concerns, all of those things take money to actually do those programs, but they also take people to implement those programs. And if we're going to continue to have programs to address whatever the issue is, all of the things that I mentioned, and not to pick one or the other versus not to pick a winner, but if you want those things, you need to have staff to do those programs. I think about our affordable housing program. We just lost one of the key folks, someone who understood how to take in all the information that we have for affordable housing programs, or for our affordable housing fund, and make that mesh with what developers are proposing and put that up against the state's affordable housing tax credit program. And that is a very specialized skill set. That person's no longer with the city. They left and are gone. Finding those skill sets is very challenging. And if we're going to continue to have programs like that, like all of the others that I mentioned, we need to find a way to ensure that those skills are valued, that they are paid an appropriate wage. And if that's something that we cannot do, then we need to think about whether or not that's something that we provide as a service. That's the way that I'm viewing this. And again, I appreciate your question. I know that this is a challenging matter, but I still believe that we all bear responsibility for being in this spot. And if we are asked to provide a service as staff, we need to have the resources and the people to provide that service. So again, I appreciate the question.
Thank you, Dan. I couldn't agree with you more. We are going to have to look at the level of services to figure out the structural deficit very much. So thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Are there other questions for registrants? Alder Harrington McKinney?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This question is, and I want to go back to Dan. And Dan, you kind of alluded to it, and I want to know if you want to add additional questions. And so my question to you is related to employee retention, you mentioned, but also the relevance of employee morale and how that is lined up with the pay equity. What are you seeing? What are you hearing along those realms?
Alder, thank you for the question. I appreciate that. This is a public forum, so I'll try to keep my comments in a reasonable fashion. That being said, morale is not great. The folks who I represent, I continually hear concerns about being, again, asked to do more with less. As I said in my response to Alder Furman's comment, or Alder Furman's question, there's been 1 year in my entire service with the city where we have not been asked to, quote, do more with less, unquote. The amount of work that's come in continues to rise. The amount of projects that we are asked to do only goes up. There are efficiencies, to be sure. Technology has allowed us to improve some of the things that we do, but I can only squeeze 26 hours out of a day. I'm not going to tell you where I find the extra 2. But there are days where I need 28, 30, 32 hours. And I am not the exception, I am the norm. The average folks who you have working for you send emails at all hours of the day and night, text messages, phone calls, all hours of the day and night to keep the city running and move projects forward. But there is a breaking point that you can get to, and I believe that we are reaching that breaking point. Morale is subpar, as my father would say when trying to be generous in his Minnesota way. It should be much higher. We work in a wonderful city. I would argue one of the jewels of the Midwest. And yet it is very challenging to be consistently told to do more with less, to be told that, we should be grateful for the jobs that we have. And I think we are, but I think it's also a two-way street, and that the city should find a way to ensure that employees understand that the city is grateful to have experienced professional employees with institutional knowledge, a deep well of institutional knowledge to help keep the city running as smoothly as it does. I have endless amounts of anecdotes about how that really happens, about how the sausage is made, if you'll pardon the expression. But that's probably better suited for beer at the Terrace or the Old Brick Beer Garden, maybe a couple of beers. But those are really what it boils down to, is that you can only push so far, and employees, I feel, are reaching a breaking point. And there's either going to be exodus or there will be mistakes made. And those mistakes are costly to employees, they're costly to the city, they're costly to taxpayers and residents. Those are not the things that we deserve as a world-class city. We deserve to have the best services, we deserve to have the best people, we deserve to have the best things here, because quite frankly, that's what's necessary to run this great city. So again, I hope that answers your question, and I appreciate the question, Alder.
Madam Mayor, I'm complete.
Thank you, Alder Harrington McKinney. Are there any additional questions for any of our registrants? All right. So President Abbas, a motion, please.
Move motion to approve alternative.
Is there a second? Moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Or, excuse me, are there questions for staff? Alder Furman.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a bunch of questions for staff. We talked about this for several hours at the Committee on Employee Relations, and wanted to see if Greg or Harper could summarize what the final decisions were at the Committee on Employee Relations.
Do we have somebody from HR here to speak to this? Greg?
Oh, sorry. The conclusion of the CER was to advance the mayor's original resolution unamended.
Greg, I don't believe that was the case. I believe we did make an amendment to it. We took out the part about
about the layoffs and the furloughs. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yes. Okay.
You're correct. I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I'm technically on vacation.
Well, I appreciate you very much being here on vacation. Greg, would you be able to explain to me a little bit? I'm trying to understand that we're considering here at Finance an alternate on something that the Committee on Employee Relations rejected. Does that play into the meet and confer process at all, which I read as part of attached to this item? How does CER's decision line up with that?
When we developed the meet and confer process, the intent was to attempt to replace collective bargaining, and the Committee on Employee Relations was supposed to be the final arbiter in a sense, like an interest, if we would go to interest arbitration under traditional collective bargaining, a neutral third party arbitrator would make a decision, and that person is not connected to the city. So the committee was developed kind of to take that place, and we went so far as to say, okay, we'll have equal numbers of management and labor and two alders on the committee, with the secretary deciding if there's a tie. So it really was meant to be kind of the final arbiter for us.
So what does it mean that we're considering something that was rejected? I mean, is that a better question for the lawyers?
No, it's not a question for the lawyers. The Committee on Employee Relations is only advisory, and what they're saying to the Finance Committee is we reject that. We are not in agreement with that.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask you some other questions. Do employees get raises in any other ways besides these increases? Are there any other processes where, or just have salaries been stagnant for a while? How does that work?
That question is to me.
Greg, if you want to answer that, if
Sure.
Dave wants to answer that, that's fine.
I don't have the documents in front of me. I think since 2011, we've maintained parity, and employees have enjoyed about anywhere from a 23% increase to about a 25% increase over those 11 years or 10 years. And I'm really spitballing that, Alder.
Alder Furman, I think your question is around you. Staff and positions move through steps, and do they get longevity increases? Am I correct? Or?
Well, if that's what it's called, I just was wondering, is there any other ways that staff are receiving raises on a regular basis besides, I do appreciate the info that Greg gave that there have been considerable raises, with, I assume, just the exception of 2021 not having that percentage increase. But are there other avenues for staff to see their salaries increased on a regular basis?
Yes. So as tenure with the city increases, there are points during that length of tenure where what are called longevity increases are added to the base wage. Those are permanent increases. And then staff can also move in steps. There might be progression series, for example, that move individual from one position level to the next based on different, maybe achieving different skills or experience and things like that. And just to give you an example, in 2021, there are a little over 600 employees that will get step increases, and those increases average about 4% of base pay. So that's roughly between 20 and 25% of city employees. And then about 600, again, a little over 600 employees will receive longevity increases, and those average about 2% of base pay. So in every budget, we're budgeting for those costs in addition to any sort of general wage adjustment that might be provided.
That's helpful. Thank you, Dave. Can I go back to Greg? Greg, this addition of the Me Too clause that CER rejected, could you give a little bit more information for the Finance Committee and for alders that are watching? Is it helpful to have the Me Too clause in our other union negotiations?
What a Me Too clause or most favored nations clause does is it binds the employer in contract negotiations to give, if they give another bargaining unit an increase, they have to give that bargaining unit that has the Me Too clause and that same increase. So it automatically ratchets up the employer's wage costs at that point.
When you're negotiating, though, with another contract, with arbitration and mediation, is there any helpful aspect of having that Me Too clause in there to possibly keep other negotiations in check based on the issues that we have with our budget?
I would say, in my professional opinion, none. Okay. I think an interest arbitrator would look at that and say, if you could agree to a Me Too clause, then you can afford the increase.
Thank you. I may come back to you, but I think my next question will probably be for Attorney Haas. How binding is this resolution? Are we able to bind future councils to particular wage increases? What's the binding power of passing this?
Hold on. Let me take a quick look at the resolution. I mean, in general, this council cannot bind future councils. But I guess what I have to look at is if we have an agreement or a contract with the associations. Then it would be binding going forward. But the just want to double check the.
So Attorney Haas, I can come back. I mean, but I guess the question while you're reviewing that would be, is this a binding contract with those labor groups? Are we even able to do that? A question for somebody in HR, are we doing exit interviews for people that are leaving? And are we hearing that wages or lack of raises, or actually very specifically, are we hearing that lack of raises are the reason people are leaving from exit interviews?
I'm not involved in that process. We are doing exit interviews, so I don't know what they're gathering in those exit interviews. I think to answer your question that you posed to Attorney Haas, Alder Furman, if I understood it correctly, you were asking if a Me Too clause for the associations would be binding on the city. Is that correct?
Both the Me Too clauses as well as the agreement of doing raises for the next few years.
The only thing that but in the meet and confer process, the only thing there's no binding of the city to anything, because at some point, if the parties disagree, the city can just say this is the way it is, and the employees, the general municipal employees, don't have collective bargaining rights. What rights they have, we've given them through the meet and confer process in our ordinances.
I appreciate that clarification, Greg. Attorney Haas, is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, I think that's correct. I think the city council could also pass a subsequent resolution to take the place of this. And so I think that's what this resolution would be in place unless there was a subsequent resolution that changed the increases.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And my last question would then just be for Dave Schmidtke. If he could just let us know, generally, when we look at a 1% raise for this groups that we're talking about, what is the budget cost of that on an annual basis generally?
Each 1%, all funds is about $1.4 million, and the general and library fund share of that is about $828,000, each 1%.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
These groups, yes.
Alder Carter, questions for staff?
Yes. Dave, I just want to go back to something that you said. So if a person is in their job 10 years, they get a longevity raise, correct?
I think the longevity starts before 10 years. But yeah, at certain lengths of tenure, there are longevity boosts.
Okay. And so you would have to stay in your position 10 years before you get that boost, or whatever the designated time frame is.
Well, you'd have to be with the city. You don't necessarily need to be in a particular position. Just
with the city, as a city employee.
Right.
Right. The other thing that you mentioned is another way that you can get a boost in your salary is to get reclassified, right? So if you're a program assistant 1, maybe you can get reclassified as a program assistant 2. There might be a bump in your salary, or to apply and get another job within the city that pays more. Am I correct on that?
Yes.
Okay. But there is no other way that municipal employees, government employees can really get a across the board raise unless it is designated for all by the city, correct? Or by the mayor. 1% raise across the board for everyone is usually something that comes out of the mayor and personnel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
That's correct. There's both general wage adjustments that in effect lift all of the salaries by a certain percentage. And then
Okay.
there's also in the city, there's these steps in longevity. There's also certain, depending on the type of work, premium pay for certain types of activities, as well as time of day when those activities might occur. But that's pretty common, I would say. And then there's the collectively bargained additional compensation for police and fire, for example, education stipends and things like that.
Correct. And Greg, exit interviews are not required, aren't they an option?
Again, Alder, I'm not involved in that process. That's over in employment services. I think you are correct. I think it's an option.
Okay, thank you. My final question is, goes back to, I think, Dave, on something that you said. I'm trying to read my notes as we talk. You know what, Dave? I am going to let you off the hook because I cannot decipher all my scribbles. So as people were talking, I was writing stuff down. So you dodged a Carter bullet.
Thank you, Alder. President Boss, questions for staff?
Yeah, thank you. Dave, one short question. Beside employees' wage raise, do we also adjust inflation?
There's no sort of automatic cost of living adjustment. That's effectively what the general wage adjustment is, to some extent meant to invest. But no, there's no automatic cost of living adjustment in wage.
Perfect. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, President Abbas. Are there any other questions for staff? Seeing none, is there discussion on the motion? Alder Furman.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make a motion to amend this alternate and restore, very simply, just restore the language about remove the Me Too clause. So remove those two new sentences at the end about any year prior to 2022 and the idea that additional wages increases will be explored through meet and confer process. If the city of Madison financial situation improves, remove that and just restore that crossed out line about be it resolved that bargaining results in a wage increase that increases the wage parity gap between general municipal employees and any other bargaining units prior to 2025, or if the city of Madison financial situation improves, additional wage increase steps will be explored via the meet and confer process. And if I can get a second, I will speak to my motion.
So that's a motion. Is there a second?
Unreadiness.
I'm sorry, Alder Carter.
I found my question, so I'm unready for that motion.
Alder Carter, you don't get to say whether you're ready for a motion or not. We can come back to your question when it's your turn if you want.
Come back to my question.
Is there a second for Alder Furman's motion?
I'll second it for discussion purposes.
Thank you, Alder Carter. Alder Furman, you still have the floor to speak to your motion.
Thank you, Alder Carter. Thank you, Mayor. We heard and talked about. We heard from Greg this evening and talked about this at length at CER. The Me Too. Adding Me Too to this resolution does not benefit us in any way. Not including Me Too certainly doesn't preclude the ability to take steps for wage parity, wage equity. I think that the best way to deal with raises with other groups, getting them is to go through the meet and confer process and see where we are financially. I certainly don't want to see us setting ourselves up to either disappoint the employees or have to make drastic cuts if negotiations that we don't have a lot of control over when it comes to the arbitration and mediation, give raises. So I'm hopeful that the Finance Committee will at least remove that Me Too clause.
Thank you, Alder Furman. So now we have an amendment before us. Alder Carter, I'm hoping that your question relates to the amendment, and thus it is appropriate for you to ask questions of staff at this time.
It never relates to the amendment, but you know what? I will talk to Dave offline.
All right. Thank you, Alder Carter. I was trying to give you a little sliver of window there. So then, on Alder Furman's amendment, is there discussion? Seeing no discussion, is there objection to recording unanimous vote in favor of Alder Furman's amendment? Alder Figueroa Cole? You're muted, Alder.
So what are we doing now? Are we voting to accept that thing and move on, or are we going replacing it, or what?
We're voting on Alder Furman's amendment.
Mm-hmm.
So if you vote aye, the amendment will be included in the main motion. If you vote no, the main motion will stay the same as it is right now.
And I already missed my chance to comment. I guess I get it.
No, Alder, I'll allow it if you wish to comment at this time.
Sorry, I mean, I know this is a very, very another difficult discussion to have, and I can't help myself from. I'm struggling a lot as a probably new alder to remove my employee hat from a policymaker hat in this particular instance. So I'm going to be very honest about that. And I am going to acknowledge my bias on this one. So I struggle with some of the comments in regards to that Me Too class when it comes to like it doesn't help us at all, or the arbitration will come back to us and say, if you made that clause, then you can afford it, whatever comes down the pipe with it. And that might be true. I mean, that's totally possibly true. But at the same time, when other employees have that ability or that privilege to have collective bargain, like the police and the fire department and the metro people have, there are consequences for them too. So if that's what the bargain is about, we can bargain raises versus additional positions or whatsoever. So I feel that the same should apply here. So if we keep the Me Too clause, and that means that we are giving a raise that is going to impact filling up positions, that should apply across the board. So if the police department wants or the fire department wants more raises, and that is going to prevent from us to be able to give them more caps, then that's a decision that they made at that time. And I just don't see why that cannot be extended to all the employees. So to me, the Me Too clause is just is that plus is also saying that we actually mean that we want to get to parity. Because right now we don't know how much money we need to raise to the people that bargain. And if we are going to give if the bargaining situation ends up being being that they get a raise, then the other employees are going to still be further removed from this parity thing. To me, it means we mean business, and we are committed to reach that parity level. And maybe I'm being naive about it, but I'm just struggling with the word game when it comes to this particular resolution. Like we either mean it or we don't. And I think like some callers said earlier with the city, but I mean, I just really struggle. Like, I don't know who was speaking earlier when they talk about people working around the clock for us. I am a workaholic. I have a full-time job. I work all day, all night long. It doesn't matter. I sent a message the other day at 2:00 in the morning, and within minutes it was answered from the city staff. I'm not expecting that level of support, but I know that a lot of people at the city staff are giving way more than they should. And we should be doing better. I mean, we should find better ways to appreciate to make them feel appreciated, and salaries is one way that can help us get there. And again, I have to acknowledge it has been a very, very difficult 2 years, with the pandemic. And I'm just extremely fortunate and grateful to have been able to come into city council on this stage and really get to know these people and see how hard they work for us. So I feel that the resolution that they put together, when we talk about bringing the people that are most impacted to the table, I think that resolution does that. It came from them, and it just made a few changes to the one that was put forward by the mayor, but I just don't see it as unreasonable. On that, I can't. I would be voting no on changing it. It's very hard for me, really, but I'm just trying to make sense of all of this.
Alder, I just want to clarify one thing, as it wasn't clear from your comments, but the Me Too clause is not saying that we will negotiate further. It is literally saying that we will give the same percentage of raise that comes in any other contract.
I understand that, and what I'm saying is that comes with consequences, right? So like the same consequences that we have applied to the other agencies before. Like if you go for the raise, you're not going to be able to fill that many positions, then it should be across the board.
To be clear, Alder, it's not with the other agencies, it's with the other unions.
Right, the other unions, I'm sorry. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know if there's anything else that I'm missing here. Again, this is morale is not just in the city that is down, it's around everywhere. I mean, it is a very difficult time, and this should really help. And that shouldn't save us from finding other ways to lift up our morale and to make sure that we have retention. But what I've seen so far in the few months that I've been in the city is a lot of people being overworked, extremely tired, pulling a lot of hours in, and they have always been available to whatever we need. So I cannot argue with, I'm sorry, I forgot his name, but whoever was speaking with Dan and Neil, I cannot argue against that. I mean, look at Greg. He just made the point right there. He's on vacation. What is he doing here? So I can't fight that. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Alder. Is there other discussion on the amendment? All right, seeing no discussion on the amendment, is there objection to recording unanimous vote in favor of the amendment? Alder Verveer?
Thank you, Mayor. I request a vote.
Thank you, Alder. We'll go to a roll call vote. So on the Furman amendment, removing a clause and restoring the original language, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, aye. Those opposed, no. As your name is called, and Dave, please call the roll.
Council President Abbas?
No.
Alder Carter?
No.
Alder Verveer?
No.
Alder Furman?
Yes.
Alder Figueroa Cole?
No.
Alder Curry?
Aye.
Mayor, the amendment fails 2 votes to 4.
Thank you. So that brings us back to the main motion, which is the alternate. Is there further discussion? Alder Figueroa Cole, is your hand still up? Alder Furman.
Thank you, Mayor. I do want to echo what Alder Figueroa Cole said. Through these discussions, I've spent many hours talking about this, many hours looking at this. I greatly appreciate the work that our city employees do. I truly believe they need to be appreciated. I have watched this budget for the last few years and seen our structural deficit, and I'm just worried about making promises we're not going to be able to fulfill. I think there's I think if you look at how we appreciate our employees and you look at other ways that they're getting raises, I'm glad we're doing that. I'm certainly want to see us do wage equity, but I think we need to just be physically responsible about that, because it's not a matter of we're not going to give departments more if we give raises. We're going to give departments less. I greatly appreciate Dan bringing up the point and look forward to my colleagues taking very seriously looking at the level of services our city provides and having a real discussion. We can't continue to afford doing everything we do. But we also can't make these decisions in the spur of the moment or during budget season. So I think we need to have much longer, much more in-depth conversations about what services we're going to provide our residents and how we can pay for that. And so I do appreciate our employees very much. I'm a sponsor of the original motion that has raises. I just don't think the Me Too clause works, and I don't think the acceleration of the raises works either. I think at some point we're going to have to deal with these promises, and I don't believe that's going to be something that a lot of people are going to be very happy about, alders included. So I will not be supporting this alternate. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Furman. President Abbas.
Thank you very much. I agree with Alder Figueroa Cole. I think so it's very important for us to keep an equity in our policy making decision, especially if we see the inflation is increasing every year, regardless of 10-year tenure, which is, I do think so as a millennium myself, I do think so 10 years is incredible for anyone to be in one organization, not to judge anyone. Millenniums usually stay 3, 4, 5, 6 years. I hardly see anybody staying 6 years. So 10 years, keeping them it's great if they stay, and they are very valuable. They bring so much skill set, and it's a pity if they are losing job because of the high cost of living, inflation / not having a paycheck raised, and the market is very competitive. These skills are really in a high demand. It's important for us to compensate fairly and really make sure we balance things in a way which really advance our city services as well. I understand this is a difficult budget. We have a budget constraint, but at the same time, it is a wise to give them what they deserve. They're not asking more. They're asking what they deserve. And I think so this particular resolution really address what they really deserve. And I will completely support this and encourage my colleagues to support that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, President Abbas. Is there further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Alder Furman, I'm anticipating a request for a roll call. The motion is to adopt the alternate. All those in favor, aye. Those opposed, no. As your name is called, and I'll ask Dave to call the roll.
Council President Abbas.
Aye.
Alder Carter.
Aye.
Alder Verveer.
Aye.
Alder Furman.
No.
Alder Figueroa Cole.
Aye.
Alder Curry.
No.
Mayor, the alternate's adopted 4-2.
Right. So that brings us then to item 21. We have a number of speakers before we get into our presentations. We will start with Alexander Wilburn of District 4, to be followed by Larissa Joanna.
Looks like we don't have Alexandra with us or Larissa.
All right, then how about Tyson Vitale of District 16, to be followed by Benji Ramirez Gomez.
Tyson and Benjamin are also not with us.
Is Megan Spielbauer Sandate here?
No.
That was everybody who was registered to speak. So we will go on to our presentations. Dave, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor. I think we can share the screen. We have an opening presentation, and then we'll move into the agencies. Christine, are you going to share the screen? And
Yes, give me 1 minute to pull it up.
While we're waiting for that, President Abbas, I believe at the end of the night, we'll be looking for a motion to refer. And Dave, I believe the motion is to refer to a council public hearing. Is that correct?
Well, we have the hearings tomorrow. So refer after tomorrow's meeting.
Right. So, President Abbas, a motion to refer to tomorrow's Finance Committee.
Motion to refer to tomorrow Finance Committee.
Is there a second? Right, it's moved and seconded to refer. We'll just hold on to that motion while we get the presentations and vote on it at the end. Christine?
Thanks. I'll walk through this quickly. So we'll just cover the highlights of the capital budget, give you some background again on the process and timeline, and then the schedule and the format for the agency briefings. So what's before you is the executive capital budget, $355 million in 2022. So in that year alone, that's what's appropriated for capital projects and programs. And that's what you adopt in November as the capital budget for 2022 and the appropriations included in that, as well as carryover appropriations from prior years. Also before you is the capital improvement plan. That totals a little over $1.1 billion. That includes the 2022 budget as well as a 5-year outlook on the specific projects and programs and their anticipated cost and funding sources over that span of time. And as we've discussed in previous briefings with you, capital budget is really multi-year in nature. When we are, for example, constructing a road or a building, we have a planning process, and then there's approval and design processes, and then we move into bidding and construction, and that can often take a few years. That the plan is the future, but you're not approving the budget for those capital improvement plan years. You'll see that in those subsequent capital budgets. So this slide just gives you a sense of how the capital budget is allocated by our elements of a great city. So that was identified through the Imagine Madison process. So each of those elements in each year. And again, just a reminder, those elements are culture and character, economy and opportunity, effective government, green and resilient, health and safety, and land use and transportation, and neighborhoods and housing. And just given the infrastructure nature of the capital budgets, particularly the transportation nature, whether it's transit or our road and street network, the bulk of that funding is in that element through each of the years. Green and resilient is another major category, again, with investments in water utility, stormwater resiliency, and areas like that. Again, just a reminder that the overall capital budget and capital improvement plan is funded from a number of different funding sources. The primary funding source is what we call general obligation borrowing. That is secured by a property tax levy, although there are multiple funding sources that are also called upon to repay that debt, and that in addition to property taxes. Intergovernmental aid is the next largest source. That's going to be primarily federal grants or federal grants flowing through state agencies, for example, the State Department of Transportation, and how it may allocate state and federal dollars for certain types of road and street projects. Then there's a number of other funding sources. Those might be special assessments, for example. Reserves applied are often in the utilities. For example, the stormwater or sewer utilities might have reserves built up from user fees that they apply to help finance projects on a cash basis. And then we have revenue bonds, which fund our sewer projects as well as water utility projects. And this is the funding source over the 6 years of the capital improvement plan. So when we talk primarily about debt and general obligation debt specifically, the repayment of that debt is called debt service, and it is a line item in the operating budget. So we are spending the proceeds of the debt that we sell in the capital budget, and we are repaying that debt with interest through debt service in the operating budget. The left-hand graph that you see on this slide shows sort of the historical time series of general obligation debt, both new and reauthorized from prior years. Those are the bars, as well as the line that shows how much we've actually borrowed or projected to borrow in the case of 2021 each year. The right-hand graph shows is a ratio of debt service paid from the general fund to the total general fund budget. And that's increased from less than 12% 10 years ago to about 17% in the 2021 and projected for the 2022 budgets, and could reach as high as a little less than 19% by 2027. If everything that is in the capital budget for 2022 and the capital improvement plan actually comes to pass. So both of these graphs sort of reflect the increasing amount of the capital budget overall, and that the repayment of the debt associated with financing the capital budget has become a larger and larger share of the city's operating budget. And the reason that's occurring is our city is growing, and additional infrastructure is needed to provide services on the city's edges as it grows. We also have aging infrastructure with the level of infrastructure that was built in the 1960s, 70s, and 80s that needs to be replaced as it reaches the end of its useful life. Just a reminder that in the American Rescue Plan Act allocation resolution that you adopted back in July, a component of that included capital funding for the 2022 capital budget, and $9.75 million is included in the capital budget for the specific projects that you see listed here, which were also identified in the ARPA resolution, allocation resolution that you adopted back in July. Again, as we've talked about in previous meetings, what has been a long trajectory of moving towards the attachment of the town of Madison, basically the dissolution of the town of Madison, and the attachment of its parcels either to the city of Madison or the city of Fitchburg is actually going into effect at the end of October of 2022. So in both the capital budget for 2022 and the operating budget, which you will see next month, are a number of items to prepare for and implement delivering services to the new residents, town residents that will be coming into the city of Madison. And so some of those areas include increases in affordable housing developer loans that are funded from the South Madison TID, as well as land banking, some equipment in the streets division. So, for example, additional refuse and recycling, containers for town residents that will be coming into the city, some additional equipment to address that, and then voting equipment for the clerk's office for 5 additional polling locations, again, to serve town residents. So that total is about $3.3 million. At the back of your capital budget books, the capital budget book for 2022, there are sections on both impact fees and tax increment financing. And again, just a reminder that TIF is a funding source for infrastructure development. So it is funding many projects in the capital budget. Again, a reminder that you have approved resolutions to dissolve TID 25. That's one of the largest and oldest TIDs in the city, as well as TID 35. And as a part of those resolutions, authorizing an additional year of incremental revenues in each of those tax increment districts for affordable housing. And that'll occur next year with taxes levied in 2022 and collected in 2023. So at the back of the executive budget book, you'll see TIF cash flow statements for each of the TIDs. Those are provided for informational purposes. They're not a budget, but they do reflect the impact of projects that are in the capital budget and the impact of that on the financial cash flow of the TIDs. Some of the highlights in the 2022 capital budget funded from TID 36 is a Blair Street Quiet Zone, the Old Middleton Road underpass, so under the railroad that runs adjacent to Old Middleton Road. That's been in the SIP for a couple of years now. That project is funded from TID 41. An extension of the Cannonball Path in TID 42, the Wingra TID, as well as the Village on Park redevelopment. A large project funded from TID 42. Further economic development loans, as well as a large amount of funding, a major component of the bus rapid transit local financing support is coming from TID 46. And you'll see there are a couple of new TIDs for South Madison, as well as State Street TID. And that State Street TID is connected to some extent to the redevelopment of the Lake Street Garage, the concept of an intercity bus terminal in that space, as well as development of the air right for housing. So this is just a little background on where to find the capital budget. It was published online on August 31st. If you go to the Finance Department webpage, the budget webpage, you can take a look at both agency requests and then the executive budget. There's the summary document for the executive budget. The horizon list is listed there. So those are projects that are not in the SIP or the capital budget, but they are important projects. They merit some additional time in terms of planning and scoping and identifying the total cost. And so they're seen as key projects, but ones that need additional information, which may result in them being brought into the capital budget or SIP in the future. And then each of the agency capital budgets, as recommended in the executive budget, is you can find those there as well on an agency by agency basis. And then just a reminder on the timeline for both the capital and operating budget. So the mayor introduced the executive budget for capital on August 31st. We are now in the Finance Committee hearings where the agencies will speak about their executive capital budget items, and both you as committee members and council members who are attending this meeting can ask questions both today and tomorrow. Then we move into an amendment phase where alders submit requests to budget analysts, and the analysts will work with you to review and finalize and publish the amendments. That happens next week, September 20th to 22nd. We want to have all of that information in from those alders who want to make amendments by next Wednesday, the 22nd, by noon, because we publish those amendments publicly on Friday, the 24th at noon. So after you've heard from the agencies today and tomorrow, if you have questions, you can direct those to the budget analysts as well as agency staff. And if you have amendments you want to begin to formulate, that'd be a good time to do that. And then this committee, the Finance Committee, will meet again 2 weeks from today, both in regular agenda as well as to take up those amendments that have been forwarded and put together by committee members and council members. The operating budget follows sort of a similar track. It just starts next month. I won't go through all those dates, but you can read them there. And then we move to the full council's review of both the capital and operating budgets. And that amendment process for both capital and operating for the council review occurs that first few days of November, with the amendments coming in by November 3rd, that Wednesday by noon, with the amendments published that Friday, the 5th. By noon, and then the council meetings on the budget are the 9th, 10th, and possibly the 11th, depending on how many days it takes to move through both the capital and operating budget, adopt those budgets, as well as adopt the budget resolution and set the property tax levy through that resolution. And this just lists the order of walking through the agencies over these next 2 days. Some of the agencies today, most of the public works and transportation agencies, as well as police. Tomorrow, you can also find that on Legistar and the materials that were sent to you. So just a quick overview on the format. Agencies will present to you 1 to 3 slides that highlights what's in their capital budget and SIP. Any of the major changes, that should take about 5 minutes, give or take. And then you'll have an opportunity to ask each of the agencies questions on their budget. And then, as I said earlier, you can submit amendments once we finish these next 2 days. And we made a presentation to CCEC on August 24th. There's some slides from that meeting, and in the recording of that meeting where there's a detailed overview of how the amendment process works. And then on the budget employee net page, you can find the budget staff, what their agency portfolios are, if you have questions and as you want to develop amendments. And I think that's it, and we'll move into the agency presentations, unless there are any sort of quick questions here at the outset.
Questions on the presentation or the process? All right, let's dive in, Dave.
All right, we'll just put them up on the screen, and then each agency, I think, will walk through their presentation, starting with the fire department.
All right, thank you, Dave. Thanks, Mayor and council members. Steve Davis, Fire Chief for the City of Madison, and joining me tonight is Nicole Marie Hall, our budget analyst. Our capital plan is relatively simple this year. We just highlighted some of the major changes that we're going to see,
And one is the fire equipment was decreased by 450,000 due to our patient monitors for our paramedic ambulances. We decided to move the purchasing all up into 1 year, so we got everything on the same cycle. And so we reduced the 23 and 24 budgets by 450,000. The second item is the Fire Station 6 remodel. We saw and you approved a budget increase of 1.1 million for that to add on space to Station 6. We're pretty excited about this project. We do have some community listening sessions coming up as time goes on. And then the third major change is Fire Station 4 remodel, the Fire Station 14 burn tower in our training site, and our training development center at Station 14 was added back into the horizon list. Next slide. Fire equipment. Fire equipment is typically used for ongoing improvements and replacement of equipment that we use, such as hose and breathing apparatus, some turnout gear, different things like that. Our cancer reduction and fitness initiative is ongoing. I know I talked to you folks last year quite a bit about this at this time of the year, and I'm sad to report that we really haven't gotten any further. Our division chief that runs that program really has not had time to deal with anything but COVID in the last year. And so our hope is in the coming months that we get everybody back together and really set a projected needs projection forward. And then we're also waiting on an AFG grant that we applied for in 2020 for extractor and gear dryers, and that's for our turnout gear cleaning. It's one of the big things that's been identified as reducing cancer amongst our members is available gear cleaning. And we're still waiting to hear the decision on that AFG grant. I believe currently we have 6 or 7 sets of extractors, and that grant would most likely add 2 or 3 more into the stations. Communications equipment, our radios and communications, we have a replacement schedule that ensures the equipment is up to date and the technology is utilized. And Station 6 will be our final USDD, our digital alerting system, when that station gets remodeled. That has been a project that's gone on probably close to 15 years now. And Station 6 is the final station that'll get that upgrade. And that system just improves the way we're alerted through the 911 center. The building improvements, the Station 6 remodel is approved, and the Station 4 improvements are added to the horizon list. And then the burn tower and training props are added back into the horizon list. And this issue's been bounced back and forth for a number of years on the list, off the list. So I'm happy to see that back on for this year. So I'll entertain any questions.
Thanks, Chief. Are there questions for fire? Alder Carter. Alder, you're muted.
Thank you. Chief, can you tell me, you said you're still waiting for the award decision on the AFG grant. We applied for it back in 2020. Do you know if that's going to come anytime soon? Do you have any other information on that?
I do not, and I'll defer to Nicole Marie Hall to see if she has updated information.
I don't really have any further information on it, but thanks, Alder, for asking the question. We have been watching the other awards in the region and have noticed that some of the other area departments have gotten awards in the past few weeks, but we've not heard anything from FEMA on any updates from there, nor have gotten any information when we reached out to, her name's escaping my mind, the senator's office to get any updates that way either.
Okay, thank you. And then let me just go back. Station 4, the Station 6 remodel I know about. Station 4 improvements. Chief, did you say that was on the horizon?
Yes. We had asked for it this year, I believe, and it would be a similar project to Station 6, that we would improve the bathrooms and some of the bedroom sleeping areas. Station 4 doesn't necessarily have a top priority for the gender equity issues that we see at 6. Still enough smaller rooms and smaller bathrooms, but the building was built, I believe, in 1982 and is just in need of some general freshening up and some rearranging on the top floor, the bedroom areas.
Okay, and then you were talking finally about the burn tower and training stuff is back on the horizon. Wasn't that on the horizon last year or the year before?
I think it was the 2019 budget that council put it on the horizon list. And somehow it fell off in 2020, but it's back on now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alder Carter, Alder Figueroa Cole. Questions for fire?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. I have a question, perhaps not for this budget, but maybe on future budgets. Where is the CARES program just released? Will fit in? I mean, I anticipate that that's going to be successful. We should really be funding that as soon as possible. That's something that that is needed all across the city. So which year will that fit in? Is that in the horizon list? Any information you can give me about that, I appreciate it.
Sure, and that's a great question. The CARES team is a line item in our operating budget. And since they really don't have a huge capital outlay, so any of the computer equipment and the desks and things like that, we've absorbed just into our fire department budget. They're in a space at Station 3, as you're aware, on Williamson Street. We own that facility, so there's no lease there. About the only thing that they will need, and you approved it in the 2020 budget already, is a van. We currently have a loaner van from Mahant and Fleet Services, because we have to really decide what we're going to want for a van. I think a fraction of us want to see an electric van, 100% electric. Those aren't available until 2022, I believe. The team needs to kind of work through a few calls and see if an electric van would actually work, or if they want to continue with a hybrid. And so that's why we've held off. As far as them needing a line item in capital, that probably wouldn't happen. We would just roll their needs into our fire equipment budget or some of our apparatus line through Fleet Services, because the numbers will be pretty minimal that they'll need.
So the van will fit into the Fleet Services, additional vans for different areas? Because I imagine you will need more than one.
Yeah, and I would say as the team grows, as we think it might, then it will become a line item in the Fleet Services budget for the vans. And then if it's still part of the fire department agency, we would cover the cost for maintenance and would have to have some increase in our operating line item for maintenance.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Alder Carter, did you have additional questions? No. President Abbas, questions for fire?
Thank you, Chief. And I apologize if you already answered that question. Just a follow-up question to Alder Carter question regarding Horizon List and training burn towers and training props. Is there any fiscal implementation on your department because of the Horizon List, and how does that work with your employees?
Sure, I understand the question.
I'm trying to.
Do we have to? Are you asking if we have to pay to get that training through MATC?
Yes.
The answer is no. And for a number of years now, I've talked about the conflict between Madison Fire and MATC, which is a scheduling conflict. They've got close to, I think, 900 students that they need to put through the fire training tower annually. And we've got close to 400 students that we need to put through. So it's really and continues to be a matter of scheduling. And we only have our main recruits for 16 weeks. So that means when the time comes and they need to get live fire training, MATC typically schedules their own stuff, and we have to kind of, I wouldn't say play second fiddle, but we take the back seat to whatever classes they have going on. And so it turns into a real scheduling nightmare for us. Don't have accessibility to that tower much as we would need and like.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
But there is no student cost for us to use that tower.
Perfect. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for the fire department? All right. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Nicole Marie.
Thank you.
And looks like library is up.
Good evening. I'm Greg Michaels. I'm the director of Madison's Public Libraries. My pronouns are he and him. There's not a lot of changes from the executive budget from the library's proposed budget. I'll start with some good news. In our flooring replacement, we're able to decrease that by $80,000 through a renegotiated lease for our Hawthorne neighborhood library. I want to give a quick shout out to facilities staff and city real estate for making that possible. Moving to our central library improvements. Also, again, the input by our library facility staff, they decided it would be best to actually spread the cost out for the updates and the improvements to Central Library. Just a note for everyone, in 2023, Central Library renovation will be 10 years old. It's gone fast. For our library collections, we've made a request for small additions to that spread out over the years. And then you'll see a rather larger increase, and that's to accommodate the Imagination Center at Rindell Park. That would begin in 2024. The small increases to collection are definitely to help us keep up demand on our collections and to address the increased cost for materials. Next slide, please. The highlight of our CIP, of course, is the Imagination Center at Rindell Park. I want to add a couple comments to the notes that you have here on the slide. I wanted to begin with a quote from a resident from the Sandburg neighborhood, which was shared in the many community conversations that we've had on the Imagination Center project. Chaz from the neighborhood had shared, I think the imagination part, people have captured really well with some great issues, but the center part, that is what I feel like our neighborhood needs a lot. Just a place where we can all gather. Addressing some of the notes that are on the slide before you, during the pre-design work, there will be a major emphasis on the operational costs of the facility. Sustainable features will help reduce utility costs. The size and layout of the space, coupled with more self-service features, may allow for a smaller staffing model, and strategic partnerships to reduce internal staffing duties, but still meet the needs of the community will help with overall operating costs. Plus, Mayor, this is for you. We're always looking for potential revenue sources to supplement the operational budget. I would say the investment in the Imagination Center also demonstrates the value gained and city agencies co-locating at this facility. The co-location of the library with parks will allow the library to help activate the park space in more ways than just the general recreational aspects associated with parks. And this is really based on our previous engagement practices with parks. But with the Imagination Center, we will be able to bring more to the public space, more consistency, and with more variety. We will be planning to do this all year long, not just the summer months. As the statement goes, there's no such thing as bad weather, just only bad clothes. To give you an idea of how this may look, though, in the 3 years prior to the pandemic, we introduced Anji Play to Rindall Park. Anji Play is exploratory learning and through play program that we've introduced here to Madison. And even though it was only for a few weeks during the summer each year, we reached over 2,500 attendees that brought together families from the community. As shared in one of the comments we collected about the program, this is an opportunity for people in the neighborhood to connect who don't normally see each other. That's what this program was able to do. Our co-location with City IT is currently being addressed. Our foundation just recently announced an award to Madison Public Library, a grant for $150,000 for our project Amplifying Community Voices. This will allow us to develop and implement a proof of concept for a virtual town hall model and allow us to examine how to develop ways for remote access to city services. We will have a tested process in place that we can bring to the Imagination Center when it opens. And with that, I'm open for questions.
Thank you, Greg. Questions for library? Alder Furman.
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, Greg. It looks like we now finally have a cost, at least associated in the budget book for operating for this the Rindall facility, $1.4 million annually. Is that finally what's been determined based on all the planning work that's been done?
That's not a set mark. That was put in as a placeholder currently. I think Alder Furman, I think we can improve on that. And I think that was based on a fully staffed 20,000 square foot facility. I think what we're discovering in pre-design work right now
It looks like Greg has frozen on us.
Yeah, it looks like we lost him here.
number at this point.
Greg, we lost you for part of that. You were saying in pre-design work, is where we lost you when you were talking about the budget.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Am I
IT
connected now?
happens.
Yeah, always during the middle of the presentation. It worked fine earlier. During the pre-design process, what we're looking at, Alder, is kind of redefining the scope of it. So we're that initial staffing operational cost was based on a 20,000 square foot facility that was fully staffed in the traditional way that we staff libraries. We're looking at a new staffing model, potentially for the Imagination Center. In addition, we're looking at a potentially smaller footprint than the 20,000 square foot that it was initially budgeted at, combined with utilizing innovative concepts of more self-service items like self-service checkout, self-service for gathering of holds that will actually add a 24/7 aspect in service to the community. I think we can bring that operational budget down.
So does that operational budget take into account what other departments may have to pay towards this facility? Whether that be parks?
That's a great question, Alder Furman. That's something that we haven't worked through yet. We don't know what portion of the operational costs will be coming from parks. We don't know if there'll be additional support from city IT as far as operational aspects of their contribution to the project. And realistically, I hope to have more city agencies on board by the time we open. So what I'm hoping is that there will be more sharing of operational costs across city agencies.
So I mean, at what point do you think you'll have a better idea of that? I mean, I hope obviously before we make the decision about, the additional $10 million for construction as planning, I know that there are planning costs that are continuing to try to figure this out. When do you expect to have a better idea so we could understand that we're going to build something that we could actually afford to maintain?
The plan is to finalize pre-design by the end of this year. And I think that will really give us a better idea when we complete pre-design where we'll be at for operational.
So then once you're done with pre-design, you're going to spend $1.1 million then on design work for the actual construction?
In the following year, in 22, we'll go into full schematic design of the facilities. And that's what that $1 million, the $1.1 million will be used for. Construction is scheduled to begin in 2023.
Okay, so once the pre-design work is done, though, it does give us an opportunity, probably one of the best opportunities to have a discussion on, is this something that we can do going forward based on, the proposed operating costs, opposed to, then spending another 1.1 million on schematics and then possibly decide at our next budget hearings next year that this is just something that's not affordable. I was hoping we were going to be a little bit further along, but probably, COVID, I'm sure, has contributed greatly to not having a better picture there.
Yeah, unfortunately, our intention was to be through pre-design by now, but you're correct. The pandemic did have an impact on that.
And was the thought that the operating costs would be taken from existing library funds, or likely you guys would be asking for more out of the operating budget in order to operate this facility?
That's to be determined, but we would like to capture as much of the operating costs for this within our existing operating budget.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alder Furman. Alder Carter, questions for the library? You're muted, Alder.
I have two questions. Number one, Greg, you said you received 150,000 donations for what program?
Alder Carter, that was from the Madison Public Library Foundation. We recently received a grant of 150,000 for a program that we're calling Amplifying Community Voices. This is a derivative of the research that we did in 2020 with the Rosemary Lee internship program, which released a report in July of 2020 by that same name, Amplifying Community Voices. And the intent of that research was to determine how we could develop a means for remote access to community meetings, community services. Not just perhaps stationed at libraries, but to be able to go beyond our buildings as well.
And then my other question is, if I recall, the Imagination Center's vision was to have other city services or even nonprofits or other type of services located within the center facility, correct?
That's correct.
And so thus far, are we just saying that contributing agencies would be IT and parks, hopefully?
Those are two that we've already identified and are actively participating in the project.
Okay, and hopefully there'll be more. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alder Harrington McKinney. Questions for the library?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Greg, I want to follow up on understanding where the Madison Public Library Foundation is. And so I'm just trying to put a placeholder in terms of their commitment to the functionality of the new Imagination Center, or where do they fit in there? Are you able to place that at this point?
Thank you for the question, Alder McKinney. If you follow any of the library's building projects, there's always been a private funding component to all of our projects, and the Imagination Center is the same. Contained within the current CIP funding is $4 million in private funding that the foundation will be working toward. They're currently organizing their campaign right now. They're also waiting for the pre-design to develop more so that they can begin to share concepts with various donors in the area. But private funding will be a major part of this project.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Are there other questions for the library? If not, thank you, Greg, and we'll go on to the next.
Hello. I want to start by kind of giving you a little history on how our capital budget has been over the last few years here. In 2020, after COVID hit, we met with finance and they asked us to reduce our capital budget by 50% in the years 2020 through 2024. And that was due to COVID and the room tax fund projections being very limited. So we did that. And then in 2021, we discovered that there were certain items that we had to add back in due to the bad state of repair of some of those items. So we look like we increased our capital budget by a lot, but we just added back items to where they previously had been in some cases. In other cases, we moved some things around. One of the items in 2022 and why that increased by $890,000 was because the air wall projects that we had 4 different air walls. 2 of them we were able to get done in 2019, scheduled to do the other 2 in 2020. And then when COVID hit, we pulled the plug on that right away because that was $555,000 to both manufacture those and install them. So those are the ballroom, which is our most used room, and then the exhibition hall are the 2 that we have to replace. So those are now in the 2022 budget, along with some things that we had cut out, like building caulking and the Olin Terrace tiles that are cracking. And then some of the rooftop tiles have to be replaced too, and that's in 2023. So that was those were some of the big items that we brought back that had been cut. And then our program budget also increased in 2022 by $960,000. Again, most of that being the air walls. Next page. So I don't want to repeat anything, but projects that we had eliminated that we determined had to be resubmitted into or put back in the plan. We did those sparingly, but 2022 has several of those projects. And then 2023 and 2024 were, we kept them lower than we had originally submitted. Some of the biggest items for the 2023 budget are the carpet. We have to order carpet, and then it'll be installed in 2024. This is the 2024 year is our 10-year renovation. So every 10 years we shut down and we replace the carpet, and then we do any other projects that are that we feel are necessary. In past years, we've demolished the walls in one area that was underutilized because of the small spaces, and made it into a larger space that's used quite frequently now. We added more restrooms to the rooftop another year. We've re-sprayed and re-coated the texture on the ceilings. These are all projects that take a long time and that are very expensive. And in this renovation period, we're again just doing items that are required or necessary to be replaced due to their being 20 some years old and just needing to be replaced in general. And that's, I think, all I have. I'll take any questions anyone might have.
Thank you, Connie. Any questions from Monona Terrace? Seeing none. Oh, Alder Bennett.
I really hope this wasn't asked or answered before, but with given ARPA, how is that affecting your budget? And are you planning to use ARPA funds to offset some of these project costs?
I'm not sure. Usually we work really closely with finance to determine, where that money would be used. I think most of it's going to be used on just supporting our operating budget. The following or next year, this year is we're expected to have a $2 to $3 million loss, and next year, while it looks much better, is at least a $500,000 loss. And those are squishy numbers only because we have no idea what COVID's got in store for us next. We had just gotten back open and things were going really well, and now we're seeing events postponing or pushing off to next year again. So it's I don't think there will be a lot used for the capital budget. I think it'll be operating. We do have we're waiting to see if we can qualify for one of the governor's grants that would give money toward capital projects, but he hasn't opened it yet, so we're not sure if we will qualify for that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from Monona Terrace? All right. Thank you, Connie.
Thank you.
And we're on to finance. Dave?
Thank you, Mayor. So in the finance department, what we basically have is just a cost allocation of primarily accounting and budget work and the staff costs associated with that to the capital budget. And so that's based on a cost allocation study that we do each year in terms of for a number of the central administrative support agencies and how those costs are allocated to different funding sources. So this has been in the budget for the last few years, and it's, as you can see, a little under $400,000 a year.
Questions for finance? All right. Seeing none. The zoo.
It's me again. So the agreement with the county for the operation and capital projects at the zoo are that on the operating side, the city has a requirement to pay 20% of the net operating costs. On the capital side, it's basically what the city chooses to commit. There's no requirement to commit towards that. So the city has pretty much every year put in its budget about $75,000 to help support capital projects at the zoo. For 2022, those are generally general zoo improvements, as well as the design and development of the African savanna project at the zoo. Otherwise, it's the county that's supporting those capital projects, as well as any sort of private foundation support or grants or gifts.
Any questions about the zoo? Seeing none. That brings us to IT.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. My name is Sarah Peaton, and I am the IT director. My pronouns are she, her. And with me tonight is Amanda Lithjohan, who is our administrative and budget manager. So in our capital budget scaling activity, we were able to limit all 2022 capital project requests to the replacement of end-of-life software or hardware applications and support that requires the continuity of operations for the city. With this, we have two new programs that were identified, the audiovisual systems at $260,000 and the digital workplace program, which I will go into in more detail on our next slide. The new camera management project is one of these projects that is replacement of end-of-life software that is also a key piece to the continuity of operations. This program funds the replacement of our current end-of-life camera, enterprise camera management system that manages the city's public safety and traffic cameras. And this will align with our system modernization goals, renewing the technologies we support according to industry and operational standards, which is very important with a camera management system. And then as well, we have an additional $421,000 that is funding positions that are in the capital budget that was approved last year to offset our operating expenses at $421,000. Can I see the next slide, please? Okay, so the two new programs that we are introducing is the audiovisual systems, and the images of the different displays is one of the examples of what the audiovisual program would do. So they do digital signage. It would support projectors, the video conferencing products, and AV recording devices for training, collaborative conferencing. It also is another piece to the virtual and hybrid meetings for both internal and external. And this is in Greg's presentation, he was speaking to the Imagination Center and the projects that we are working on together for this virtual city hall. This program would also help to support some of that. And then the other new program is the digital workplace. And this is to increase the number of online services and the opportunities for collaboration with internal staff and external. And one of the key projects that we're going to be working on next year is being able to support staff that are working remotely who do very graphic intensive work. It's a huge burden for them, for our network, to have them working through our VPN. So we use a remote desktop, and we need to continue to support that and to make it even more robust for their productivity. And that is all I have.
Thank you, Sarah. Questions for IT? Alder Figueroa Cole.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you for the presentation. I am sorry, I actually sent all my questions ahead of time, but I overlooked this one.
Alder, you remuted yourself.
Yeah, I did. Okay. Something is happening going on there. Okay, so so there was a resolution before my time regarding surveillance technology, and there was some specific language on that resolution that would say certain criteria needed to be met in order for or certain criteria needed to be sent to council for approval. And I'm not really totally familiar with it. I heard about it, and when I read the documentation and I saw the public safety and traffic cameras, that kind of triggered that remote thought. Can you educate me on that resolution, and can you tell me if there's anything that, if these project, the camera management system health and safe project, impacts that process at all? And again, I'm sorry, I should have sent this before today.
Well, I assume that somebody would ask it, so that's a great question, and I am prepared to answer it. So it's actually an ordinance. So it's a new ordinance, surveillance ordinance, and what that ordinance is saying is if you have technology that is surveillance in nature, then you have to reach out, and there's a whole process that goes along with that. IT helped to set up that process, and I was heavily involved in the surveillance ordinance. But what, in fact, the camera management system is doing is it's administering the cameras and making sure that we have the secure controls that we need to have as part of that surveillance ordinance. So as we were working through the surveillance ordinance, it was recognized that there were gaps in what our processes were today and what the abilities were that the surveillance ordinance was looking for, and this should help to address that. So it would have more robust reporting, it would have more robust controls in place, it would help also with access and who has access and when. So it's putting in technology that is simply managing the hardware that is there today. So it's not really surveillance as much more as it's putting in those controls around what that surveillance is looking for.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate the detailed explanation.
Of course.
Thank you, Alder Harrington McKinney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Sarah, you mentioned the fact of supporting a more robust provider of the virtual platforms. And so that's just a summary in my words. Does that also include a budget for equipment purchase? How does that fit in, or is that something that you have reflected in your budget as, as something that just will be? Thank you.
Yeah, great question. Yes, this budget does reflect being able to put in the hardware and the software to continue the extension of meeting coverage in MMB and other facilities.
Does that include is staff that's currently working remotely? Are you able to supply the equipment that they need? Is that all incorporated in this expanded budget?
So yes, the way we would be supporting them working remotely is that when there is staff that is working in the office, that they would be able to have those hybrid meetings that they would like to have together in a room, in a conference room, especially as, hopefully moving forward in the future, that this is something we're able to do, or being in a meeting room right now with our masks on, but being able to have that back and forth so that we are supporting staff that are both in both places. And then as far as devices and stuff, that's part of our workstation lifecycle management program that we already have. So this is additional. We have devices for employees for, like laptops or tablets, if that's what they request. And those they can take back and forth. And then the audio visual is the other part of that component.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Bennett.
Hi. So I don't see anywhere in the budget like it explicitly saying that the new programs or any of the programs will support like a hybrid model. Will that be reflected in improving the audio visual systems or digital workplace or anything?
Yes, that would be part of this audiovisual program.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Alder Carter, did you have a question? You're muted, Alder.
Thank you, Mayor. Sarah, the replacement of the camera management system, is this with the same software company, or did we put out a bid on that?
So what we did is we looked at a couple vendors, got a ballpark pricing, and now we are collecting all the business analysis that we want to make sure that we get from agencies of needs that they have, and then making sure that we reflect everything with the surveillance ordinance. And Boyce came up with kind of a high-end number of 750, and we'll do the RFP if it passed next year.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Alder Foster.
Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. Both these programs make sense. I'm curious how they fit into the work plan over the next year, if they were to pass, particularly related to other programs that were previously authorized. I'm thinking of things like the legislative management system upgrade or 311 that are two big initiatives that I have been struggling to get put forward. How would the inclusion of these new programs impact the work programs for those or other initiatives that you have on the docket already?
So 311 actually has no money behind it. There is no program. There wasn't anything. There's not an amendment for that that we had last year for 311. We've been doing behind the scenes work, though, on setting up the infrastructure in terms of the permitting and the workplace and the work order systems and getting that moving forward and the asset pieces of that. So we're continuing that work. We actually were awarded a capstone grant. And with that, we are getting assistance from Acela to help with getting a new module set up so that we can move forward with that back end part of the 311 system. So we are moving forward with that, and that's where quite a bit of energy has been focused in the last several months. The legislative management system, we are working on the upgrade right now. And once we have the upgrade, we're hoping to do the upgrade in December. We're trying to figure out where the least impact is to the Common Council and their meetings. So December looks like that would be the best time to do that. And then we have also are going to be bringing back Lisa Veldrin, and she is going to be helping us with doing all of the testing and helping with the workflows as part of the Legistar team to continue with that support of that. So I feel like we're moving forward with that. These two programs are programs that we were already doing, but it's just identifying that there's more work that has been requested and more demand for different purchases, and that we needed to move these into programs that made sense for our budgeting. So they fit within our work plan and are not deterring us from anything that we're working on currently.
Thanks for your answer.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Revere.
Thank you, Mayor. Hi, Sarah. As you likely recall, this time every year, I ask you and Dave to provide us an update on our ERP system implementation. I see you nodding your head, you remember, and I'm sure Dave does as well. So I was hoping that you and Dave could give us an update on where we are with the final phases of implementing Munis and our enterprise financial system. And I do see on page 6, as in previous years, we do have listed $550,000 carry forward balance for Munis implementation. So as I recall, last year we talked about Tyler utility building and tax module. So if we could get the current update, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Certainly, Alder Revere. I'll start, and Sarah can definitely give you a lot more detail as well. As we discussed last year at this time, we're still in the midst of the utility billing module implementation. I would say it's going pretty well, and there have been a number of basically testing of running the data through the system and finding errors and fixing those errors, and I think a lot of progress has been made on that. We're now at a point where we're trying to sync up bringing that module live with having updates to the broader Tyler system, so that we're not sort of putting in the module and then having to redo a series of things or retrain people. And so we're hoping that will happen given the timing of some of these updates in Tyler. For example, a cashiering update, there's I think a broader update that's occurring for the entire system. We're hoping by late spring or summer that we can of 2022, we can bring the module up for utility billing. There's also some interactions with the tax system that's currently in planning right now, and the tax system's also being affected by these broader Tyler updates. So we have to kind of adjust the timing of bringing both of those systems live as these other updates are occurring. But I think both are on a good pace. I think there's things that we're identifying that may be benefits regarding what we call a central customer file, how we're sharing data between multiple systems so that information, for example, on individuals' addresses don't need to be entered multiple times. And that'll also have some bearing on the CAMA system project that's going on and in a planning stage. So all these things we have to kind of fit together and make the timing work, but I think we're on a good pace with all of those items. And I think there's good synergies with the water utility and their staff in terms of working through these issues, getting the system in place, ready to go, building the interfaces to other systems that provide information to utility billing, such as work orders and asset management and things like that, as well as that, like I said, those other connections to the tax system and so on. Sarah, I'm sure you have some things you want to add, but that's a quick summary.
Well, you had a very robust response there, Dave. I guess the only other thing I would say is that, as Dave has noted, there's a lot there that we are going to be tackling, and this is going to take us several years more to get through this. And making sure that we are integrating where we need to integrate, and really working to address both internal and external customer needs when we are bringing in these new systems is very important. So we want to do this well, and we want to do it carefully so that we make sure that when we move forward, that we have the acceptance that we need with these new systems.
Thank you both. To just clarify one thing, Dave, you had said you anticipate perhaps this time next year, a little earlier, late summer of next year, implementation of utility billing. Is that true also for the tax module?
Yes. I mean, the tax module will be ready for the 2022 taxes levied, collected in 2023. So it may not be exactly at the same time as utility billing, but it'll be a plan, horizon, trajectory that has it ready for those 2022 tax bills. Wouldn't you say, Sarah?
Yes, that is the intent, that we would be moving to that for the 2022 taxes. So implementation would be December, would be that implementation for the tax system.
Very good. Thank you both. Many years in the making here.
Thank you, Alder Ferrier, for tracking the project. You and I may be among the few that were here for the whole thing.
That's true.
Alder Heck, you have a question for IT?
Yes, thanks. Sarah, you mentioned hybrid meetings, and Alder Bennett also asked about hybrid meetings. Were you, in answer to her question, were you referring to hybrid meetings of staff, for instance, as opposed to hybrid meetings for Common Council and BCCs? Or both?
So that would be for both. And just to note that, hybrid meetings, there are other components to that. So there is staffing that would go along with that. So yes, that would be in that audiovisual. The funding is for all of these different things.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Alder. Are there other questions for IT? All right. Thank you, Sarah. All right, sustainability is next.
Hello, I believe that's me. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jessica Price. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the new Sustainability and Resilience Manager for the City of Madison. I'm really excited to be with you tonight. And so I'll give you an overview of the Sustainability Improvements budget. As you'll recall, sustainability was moved from engineering to the Mayor's Office capital budget, really to enable a more holistic and community-wide approach to our sustainability and resilience efforts. So since the 2021 SIP was adopted, we've actually been awarded 2 grants totaling nearly $500,000 to fund our energy efficiency upgrades and affordable housing. So that's what you'll see is the difference indicated in the graph. And so these grants really account for the only change in the sustainability budget for this year. Our capital budget is really what helps us, it enables us to implement both the 100% renewable energy plan for the city and the sustainability plan. So if you can go to the next slide. So this slide really gives you a better sense of what our sustainability work is. And it really falls into 4 major categories. We have energy efficiency, renewable energy, building electrification, and sustainability outreach and education. So in 2022, we're really focused on developing and growing our work within the community. And this is reflected in the capital budget as funding for really strategic planning and grants. So turning to this high-level budget breakdown, under energy efficiency, we're working on both policies and projects aimed at improving the energy efficiency of buildings, with a special focus on bringing those benefits to affordable housing. So this includes developing a community energy grants program and helping to retrofit naturally occurring affordable housing. In the renewable energy category, we're continuing our successful rooftop solar grant program, Madison, as well as delivering on the 100% renewable energy plan for city facilities through the purchase of renewable energy credits, or RECs. We're also working to develop a program to support electrification of buildings, which is really a key strategy for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And finally, we'll continue to work with our partners on sustainability outreach and education. And that includes working with Sustain Dane. We fund things like the Master Recyclers program, and a lot of our partnership work falls in that category. And we're also updating the sustainability plan this year. And so we have some funding budgeted for the support and outreach necessary to make sure that that plan gets public input. So that is our summary. I really thank you for your time today, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Jessica. Are there questions about sustainability? Seeing none, we're going to let the new employee off easy tonight. Thank you, Jessica. And we'll go to the CDA.
Good evening. So tonight we'll just be covering CDA redevelopment, and that is 3 major items. So Mosaic Ridge is our single family home development. And here we did a record number of home sales in 2020 and 2021. If we sort of keep at that pace, we think we'll be able to finish the construction of the subdivision in 2022 and then no longer have expenditures. I should also note that what this is really is that we build a house, sell it, and then we recycle those proceeds to build the next house. On public housing redevelopment, the CDA board has been focused on rebuilding our public housing portfolio, with the triangle being the first site. So what we have here is some upfront money for strategic planning, master planning, visioning on the site that would happen in 2022 before we actually engage in the redevelopment in future years. And then Village on Park. So in 2021, we passed a budget amendment to do $3 million of design and demolition work to get things started. But most of that work will actually occur in 2022 as we build back the parking, stormwater, public amenities, green spaces, and that's the $8.2 million that you see there that's funded through TID 42. And then the next page is basically everything I just said, but in narrative form. So I don't need to reread that for you, but I can take any questions.
Questions for CDA, Alder Figueroa.
Hi, Matt.
So,
couldn't let you off the hook. So there was an article in the paper this past week, and I know what's this past week because today's Monday, so I don't remember exactly when it happened, but it wasn't today. Talking about some additional things coming to council for the park project. Did you get a chance to, I don't know if you saw the article, but it talked about something, a bridge over the line. I mean, like a bunch of stuff in there that I hadn't heard before. So
you're referring to the article about the South Madison plan?
Probably. Well, that's not the same as the park thing?
So for Village on Park, we're just covering things that are on the CDA owned parcel at Village on Park that we'd be paying for, which is a lot of stormwater, parking, drive aisles, that kind of thing.
I see. So the park project is going to be spread all over the place, pretty much, in other areas of the budget.
So Alder, I think what you're referring to is the article that was written about the South Madison planning process. The plan is not complete. It has not gone through committees. It has not yet been adopted by the council. So at this point, it wouldn't be reflected in any budget anywhere. You'll have a chance to see it in much more detail before we would reach the budgeting stage.
So it's not associated to Village on the Park at all then? Or are they connected?
No, I mean, it covers the villager because the villager is in the geography of the South Madison plan.
Okay. All right. Well, again, I'm just trying to, that seems to be such a large project, and we have heard about it so much since we started, and I still don't have a clear picture of, all the arms and legs that it has, but it's all good. Just, I'll guess that maybe I can sit with Matt and we can have that discussion on the side. So thank you.
Thank you, Alder. President Abbas, questions on the CDA?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Matt, for the presentation. Matt, one quick question. I think so. I also had that discussion with the different city staff as well. I know in the project when we develop, we have a design, bid and build. either it's CDA or cities usually go through that route by designing, and we spend substantial amount of money on designing process as well. With the CDA, just thinking very creatively, we had a really great success with the Bayview Foundation design. It's phenomenal for affordable housing. You talk about sustainability, equity, everything is checkbox with that. Is there any way we could, replicate those type of design in city process with CDA housing in future, so we don't need to invest so much on the design process, and we could more go towards bid and build, and that's also cost saving as well. So I'm just curious, while you're looking at this capital, so from construction standpoint, do you have any thoughts about that might comment?
Sure. So for the Village on Park itself, we're using city engineering and following a pretty standard public works process. But I think when you look at the public housing redevelopment, by its nature, it's different because we have to go through a process with HUD, with the federal government, to just be allowed to do anything really with those properties. But then for the Triangle in particular, the CDA is actually right in the middle of our request for qualifications process to bring on a team, in many ways modeling what Bayview did. So we're calling for getting consultants that focus on resident engagement, some that focus on sort of the bigger master planning visioning process, consultants who specialize in the really obscure financing that we have to go through to mix together HUD funds and tax credits and all of these things. And so we put that request out, and hopefully we'll have that team on board in the next couple of months. And then what we envision is a multi-month engagement process with residents to really tease out what's important to them and craft this vision so that when we actually get to the projects, the building by building piece, we can be ready to jump into it and have already built out that support with the community, with the neighborhood. And again, like we watched what Bayview did, and we're trying to copy all the best parts.
All right, sounds good. Thank you.
Alder Figueroa call another question?
I'm good. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Any other questions for the CDA? All right. Thank you, Matt. Planning.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm Heather Stouter. I'm the Planning Division Director and use she, her pronouns. And I'm very grateful to have with me this evening Karen Wolf, the Madison Arts Administrator. We'll keep our piece fairly simple and straightforward. We have just one program in the capital budget, and that's our Municipal Art Fund. And for the most part, we are continuing with what we had shown in the 2021 budget. No major changes to discuss this evening. But I want to talk just a little bit about what the Municipal Art Fund does include. And so we have many art programs. The Madison Arts Administrator, Karen Wolf, works hard to build community partnerships and bring in money from partners when possible. We have this common thread of funding each year. Approximately $90,000 per year is spent on our public art program that are physical assets that the city owns and manages as part of our public art collection. And then another $60,000 within the fund goes toward the Madison Arts Administrator's time spent on the Madison Municipal Art Fund projects. Again, no changes anticipated in that funding request, but I want to mention a few of the things that we foresee moving forward in 2022. First is, as many of you will recall, there was a lot of work done on State Street with regard to the murals that were done in 2020. Those murals are a precious part of the city's art collection and history at this point, and it will take time and funding in order to conserve and place those murals in the years to come, perhaps. So that is one major effort that Karen will be continuing with support from the Municipal Art Fund. Second, one of our major art projects, public art projects that was delayed due to COVID is a substantial piece for the Darbo neighborhood on the northeast side. And we anticipate in 2022 and 2023 significant work being done to complete that piece of work. And then listed also here is continued support for our Artist in Residence program, currently nestled within the Darbo neighborhood in Thurber Park. That location will change in the years to come, but we'll have another year or two with the Thurber Artist in Residence in that location. And then finally, there are several other smaller scale public art projects that are really recommended by the Madison Arts Commission and brought to the council. So that's where we see the bulk of the 2022 funding going. And I can go to the next slide here quickly. And much like Matt Walker mentioned, a lot of this is a repeat to the narrative, but I do want to mention this second bullet point here, that the actual spending through the Municipal Art Fund does fluctuate pretty substantially year to year due to changes in major public project schedules. And I'll mention the public market here as one, and also unforeseen needs and opportunities that come up. The State Street murals was another. And so there's often a lot of fluctuation in the amount of funding spent year to year, but we do rely on this steady stream of funding year to year, and we're working hard to spend down still money from 2020 as we move forward. But we're confident that all of the funding being requested for 2022 and beyond will go to very good use as we continue to try to support the arts, bouncing back from the pandemic, like many other aspects of our community. I'll leave it at that, and happy to take questions. And again, Karen Wolf is here as well.
Thank you, Heather. Are there questions for planning? Alder Figueroa Cole.
Hi, Heather. So these title Municipal Art Fund considerations, is that the project 13775 that's under Salvation Army Darbo site neighborhood and housing? Is that the same thing? Or because that kind of like caught my attention immediately, but it seemed to be so specific. And here you're kind of like talking about more things that I didn't actually remember reading on this documentation.
Sure. So the Salvation Army property is a different line item within the capital budget. And I believe that will be covered in perhaps greater detail by Community Development Division. We do anticipate a lot of opportunity for synergies in that area, but we've long identified a need for a public art piece within that Darbo neighborhood, so right within that same area, but it's not affiliated directly with the Salvation Army building. And I invite Karen to jump in if she'd like to.
That's correct. The only thing that I'm aware of at the Salvation Army building is that it is necessary to do conservation on a mural that we supported many years ago. That needs to be, it came off the building, it needs to be conserved and put back up there. And there is also a temporary public art piece in the water retention area that we just placed to kind of gauge public reaction and begin the process for our permanent piece.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Bennett. Questions for planning?
Yes. So in this art fund to conserve the placement of State Street murals, could you talk more about that? And does this budget reflect funding to pay the artists that made the murals?
The budget, we've estimated for all kinds of possibilities there. So we don't know the outcome yet because we've been in the process of collecting the boards and there's still some significant pieces that we're trying to track down. But mostly what we've done is collect the boards and had conservators look at them and tell us what condition they're in. And unfortunately, in most cases, we don't have full intact murals because they were kind of pieced together to go on buildings and inevitably, a section is lost or something got ripped when it was deinstalled. We anticipated that, and that's why we worked with American Family to create the book that would be the kind of permanent documentation of that project. But even that is not complete because there were important pieces that weren't in there. because the city didn't fund them or for multiple reasons. Anyway, so where we are right now is just at the tail end of trying to track down pieces and finish that conservation report. And then the next step really is, my plan is to interview the artists, sharing with them the condition of their piece so that they're kind of the first to know. In some cases, they're completely lost. And I just want to respect the artist and give them that information, and then talk to them about what they would like to see happen and what kind of additional support they're looking for from the city. I also want to collect data on all the opportunities and projects that have come to them as a result of participation, because I haven't been able to quantify that to date, but I know it's quite significant. And I want to share that with you as a model of small scale investments in artists that are really job development. Anyway, I digress. So I want to interview those artists and talk to them. And we did do a survey that has 1,500 responses about what the public would like to see happen with those murals. So we'll combine that, and we'll take that all into consideration, and we'll make a plan that will be presented to you all about what, with every different piece, what we think could happen, should happen, where it might go. In some cases, artists have very strong opinions about a certain nonprofit that they would really like to see their piece with. And we just want to weigh all those considerations. So it will be a bit of a lengthy process, including coming up with a budget, a realistic budget of what it will take to enact that plan. And we hope to be working on that all of next year.
So for those that have strong opinions about like where they'd like their piece to go, will they have like autonomy of that?
I wouldn't say they will have complete autonomy, but their opinions will be very heavily considered. I think all of them, I had conversations with every single artist and had them sign a statement so that I, could look them in the eye and know we had this conversation. And they all knew, and they all entered this project knowing that this was about sort of the greater good, and that they were, that this project wouldn't ultimately belong to them, that the city was commissioning it, but these were on boards that didn't belong to us, that this was really a collective project. I haven't had any conversations with any artists that lead me to believe that they would feel differently at this point. But we'll have to consider that and take that into account if that comes up, that an artist is just, really wants one direction. Like, for instance, what if an artist wants their piece back? Does the city want to relinquish that piece to that artist, and then it's not part of a collection and it's not part of the public, even though it has such important public significance? Those are difficult questions that I'll bring to the Madison Arts Commission and to you if I can't resolve that with an artist. But my hope is that the plan that I'm able to present to you is, what everybody agrees on, and that we come to some sort of consensus. But that could happen, Alder Bennett, that there's disagreement in what should happen with that piece.
Certainly. And just to go back to the last question. So just to be clear, because the city commissioned the project, and I'm saying, I don't know if commission means we're paying these people.
Yes. We paid them, yes.
Oh, okay. So this budget does include.
No, but we may need, so in my view, that it's best practices that we paid them for that project, but they still own the copyright. That's still their energy and their design. So if, for instance, that I don't know if you've noticed that we've been putting some of them on utility boxes around town.
Yeah.
Pay the artist again a licensing fee for that one particular use. That doesn't mean we can use it again in another setting. We would have to pay them again. So every time we use it, unless we negotiate with them, say we want one to be, the next flag or something, then we would negotiate a kind of licensing fee that would give us permanent use of that image. And we'd probably have to pay them a bit more. But at this point, we've just been paying for the singular use of their image.
Okay.
So it depends, what we want to do with that piece. If we want to make a poster and give it to every school child in Madison, we'll negotiate that fee. And so that's why I don't have an exact budget, but we know it will be coming from this fund.
Great. Okay. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Alder Revere.
Thank you, Mayor. I know that in this current year budget, Heather and Karin, we decided last year to begin capitalizing part of your costs, Karin, in terms of your labor that you provide us. Could you two explain, or one of you explain, how that has worked? I'm curious, have we been charging time to particular projects funded by the Municipal Art Fund, or are we automatically taking a specific amount of money out of the Municipal Art Fund and charging part of your labor costs to the Art Fund? I know it was $60,000 that was proposed in the adopted current year budget.
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. So that 60,000 was based on a real 2019 number. In the planning division, we don't track much of our time to particular capital projects, but we do track our time to items in our work plan. And one of those items is the Municipal Art Fund administration. And so we were able to take that real 2019 data to come up with a good estimate for the proportion of time that the Madison Arts Administrator position spends on the Municipal Art Fund projects. And so what we'll need to do is look at 2020 and soon 2021 data as well, and make sure that that's still an accurate amount to be requesting year to year. But a more detailed answer to your question is that Karin and a few other staff who spend time on the Municipal Art Fund do not currently charge their time to a particular project within that Municipal Art Fund. It's all reflected as time spent administering the Municipal Art Fund. We don't have it broken down in greater detail at this point.
I see, but unlike other agencies, as you know, Heather. So yeah, that was my curiosity question, because as we know, the Darbo Neighborhood Public Art Project has been anticipated for many years now and hasn't moved forward. And I was just curious if our budgeting was anticipating the $60,000 this year billed to specific Municipal Art Fund projects or overall administration. So your answer is that Karin, perhaps Angela and others, some of their labor costs are being automatically transferred from this capital budget line item. And my follow-up then would be, in this current proposed budget for 22, is it a similar figure of about $60,000 or?
Yes, it is. So it's 90,000 to go toward actual physical projects or conservation, and 60,000 to go toward salary.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you, Karin, for all you do.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Bennett, did you have additional questions? Alder Figueroa-Cole?
Two questions and a comment. So for the comment, thank you, Karen, for clarifying about the licenses payments, because I had, there was a little bit of controversy of putting the art in those utility boxes and paying the artists, so that I'm glad that got resolved. So how old is this fund? When was this budget line was created? Is this something that has been going on for a long time, or is this something new?
It's been here over 15 years, as long as I've been here. We've had this line. So I think it was actually the first thing started in 1977, Municipal Art Fund.
Okay, and then for these funds for the community to access them, do you just do RFPs like Jim O'Keefe's team will do for their other projects, or?
In a variety of ways. For large projects, we often do an RFQ where we just ask the artist to give their qualifications, so that we're not asking them to work free, and then we pick from among those artist qualifications and their past work samples, and then we give them a design fee to actually come up with a proposal. In other cases, we do an RFP. For instance, we're looking for a conservator to work on the Annie Stewart fountain, and that's being done through a RFP. And then in some cases, we do open applications, open calls. Like when we had grant money to transform felled ash trees into works of art. And if you've been to Penny Library, you see the beautiful chairs and benches and some of the projects there. And there we just did an application for artists to try to get into that program. And then the Arts Commission vets that. Sometimes we use city purchasing if it's a larger budget amount. And if it's a smaller project, a blink level, a $1,500 project, the Madison Arts Commission vets it.
And my last question, is there ever collaboration between these agency and transit or for traffic calming art projects?
Yeah, that's
interested on it, and I just trying to figure out where he can get funding from.
I think we collaborate with traffic engineering probably the most. We've done, for instance, there's an ordinance that was passed that allows us to do pavement paintings on some, smaller streets. We're right now looking for funding to add a bike lane on Fisher Street. So keep your fingers crossed. We find out this month if we got that funding. We do things with the bike path a lot over at, is it Leopold School? Yes, that we have a sculpture right along the bike path to welcome students into school. So yeah, we collaborate with them often. And if you want to talk with me about a particular traffic calming issue, I'll reach out to you about that. We can.
I appreciate it. Thank you. That's all I got.
Thank you, Alder. Are there any other questions for planning? Seeing none, thank you, Karen and Heather. And we'll go on to community development.
Thank you, Mayor and Alders. I'm Jim O'Keefe. I serve as the Director of the Community Development Division. I am joined tonight, as I often am, by my colleague, Lynette Rhodes, who works on many of the activities and projects that we'll be discussing tonight. The executive budget includes sizable infusions of new resources to CDD's capital budget. The proposed authorized level for 2022 is more than $14.5 million higher, nearly threefold increase over what was anticipated just a year ago in the 2021 capital improvement plan. Now, to be clear, the vast majority of that increase, some $9.5 million, reflects one-time commitments of federal American Rescue Plan funds previously approved by the Common Council and devoted to a number of projects and activities that address high priority areas, including affordable housing and homeless services. For the most part, whether it is pursuing a new shelter to serve homeless men in our community, converting a hotel to affordable housing, or developing housing options for youth, the completion of authorized projects and activities will require partnerships with others, for example, Dane County and local nonprofits and private developers, and will need to leverage other financial resources, including, for example, federal tax credits and private borrowing. And though funding authorizations are concentrated in 2022, these projects will not happen quickly, but rather will play out over the next several years. So let's turn to some of the highlights. I start with plans for a new men's shelter. This gets a little tricky, so bear with me. Recall we started with $3 million of GO borrowing authorized in the 2021 budget. The executive budget increases that by $4 million. That $4 million includes recognition of $3 million of county funding, also authorized in the county's 2021 budget. So brings those into the city budget and adds an additional $1 million of city GO borrowing. That brings the total to $7 million. Recall too that earlier this summer, the Common Council approved the designation of $2 million of American Rescue Plan funds to support this project, and that gets us to a total of $9 million. And I just want to note, and I've confirmed this with finance staff, that the narrative summary that is at the bottom of page 35 of the executive budget should reflect total authorizations of $9 million rather than $10 million. So move on. Continuing with the theme of investments supporting shelter projects, the next highlighted item is the $2.5 million of ARPA funds made available to acquire a property owned by the Salvation Army in the Darbo-Worthington neighborhood. The Salvation Army has signaled its intent to sell this property, with the proceeds to be put toward financing the agency's planned redevelopment of its family and single women shelter on the 600 block of East Washington Avenue. So this purchase would make a contribution toward the estimated $30 million cost of that project. But at the same time, it positions the city to satisfy a long-held goal of utilizing that property to better serve neighborhood residents in the Darbo-Worthington neighborhood. And there's, I think many of you are beginning to hear there is a lot of interest in that property and work going on around a larger development that would include it. Shifting gears to affordable housing development, the next three items provide funds to continue efforts to expand the supply of affordable housing. First, the executive budget continues to grow authorized funding levels for the city's mainstay affordable housing fund, raising the annual authorized funding to $7 million beginning in 2022 and continuing that level throughout the term, the balance of the capital improvement plan. So that's more than, that's $1 million more in 2022 and an additional $500,000 in each year thereafter than what had been anticipated a year ago. Second, the executive budget makes available $2.5 million of ARPA funds, likely to be used in combination with a separate $5 million federal grant to the city to help acquire a hotel and convert it to permanent housing, permanent affordable housing. It's a strategy that has been used successfully around the country that promises to shorten the time it takes to bring new housing units online, and we're interested in pursuing it. Finally, the budget provides $2 million to support an affordable housing development that would provide housing options to youth who are aging out of foster care or otherwise facing the prospect of becoming homeless. In all of these partnerships, in all of these proposed projects, partnerships with nonprofits and/or private developers will be necessary, and those partners will be selected as we proceed through a request for proposals or a request for qualifications process. And now we can move on to the last slide. Next area involves our group of housing-focused consumer lending programs. With the benefit of filled vacancies, CDD is now poised to revive and improve our rehabilitation programs, including marketing them to owners of small rental properties. We are looking to expand efforts to promote and support home ownership among households of color. This work will be aided by both a one-time $500,000 infusion of ARPA funds and an ongoing approximately $1 million annual increase that will continue through the duration of the SIP. Community development staff and finance staff are engaged in a focused racial equity project that is being hosted and supported by the Bloomberg Philanthropies through What Cities Works. The effort looks to identify new strategies to increase home ownership rates among people of color. We anticipate using some of these new funds to support those strategies. Finally, last but certainly not least, the mayor saw fit to fund an item off the Horizon list, a community facilities improvement program. We're excited to have this new resource, this $1 million resource to support smaller scale capital projects that will help develop or expand or improve community spaces like neighborhood centers and others that are owned and or operated by community partners. This is a resource that has long been sought by neighborhood resource teams, and it will complement an existing but an under-resourced program currently funded with community development block grant funds. And while that program has worked well in many instances, it is often proven difficult for some local organizations, either because the funding isn't always there when it is needed. It relies in large part on loan repayments, which are often unscheduled and unpredictable, and because it brings with it regulatory requirements, which can be burdensome and costly to comply with. So there's a lot here. We appreciate the mayor's and the council's support of the work we're doing, and we're ready to get started. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Jim. Are there questions for community development? Not seeing any hands raised. Alder Rivera.
Thank you very much, Mayor, and thank you, Jim. It's just breathtaking to think about the amount of resources that are able to be provided to implement the critical work that you and Lynette and your other colleagues in CDD are doing now and will be doing in the future. When I think about what the CDD budget once was, it really is awe-striking here. The one question that I had for you that I think is still very much immediate in the minds of so many in our community is what progress we are making in locating a purpose-built men's shelter site. Obviously, you and others on your team briefed this committee in closed session, I guess about a month ago now, just about a month ago now, a little over a month ago now, as to where you were. And I was wondering if you and other colleagues in planning are able to share with us more of an update, and realizing we're in open session here, but more of an update on how we're doing with that.
I'd be happy to, and perhaps the mayor or perhaps Matt will want to add. I would just say, Alder Revere, that the long wait is nearly over. As we briefed the finance committee, as you mentioned about a month ago, we were vetting 5 sites. We will be proceeding with recommendations to the council to begin to act on the results of those evaluations. And I expect that as early as yet this month, there will be proposals put to the Common Council around next steps for that shelter and other resources that will support the homeless population in Madison.
That's very exciting.
Is that vague enough?
I was going to say, I'm trying to pin you down a little. I know we're in open session, but not to get folks' hopes up, Jim, and again, obviously, Mayor and Matt want to jump in as you wish. But are you saying that there's even a chance that there might be something introduced at the next council meeting on the 21st?
Yes, Alder, I think you can anticipate something coming forward. I would just remind us all that the question is really not simply the question of where does a permanent men's shelter go. It's a complex, multifaceted question that includes the resolution that the council approved to move forward with a shelter campground at Dairy Drive. It includes a need for another temporary men's shelter so that the public market can move forward. It obviously does, yes, include a permanent men's shelter location, but also potentially additional sites for shelter campgrounds and tiny house villages. So there's a lot of moving pieces here, and there's still a couple of properties that we're waiting for a little bit of information on. So while I do think we'll be taking the Dairy Drive resolution really was one step. I think we'll see additional 2-3 steps probably coming at the next council meeting. And then there will be, additional steps 4, 5, 6, who knows how many in the future.
Thank you for the very welcome news, Mayor and Jim. I appreciate that there are a lot of moving pieces here, and obviously there's a tremendous amount to the overall strategy here, besides just citing the purpose-built men's shelter. So I know many others in the community are with great anticipation, knowing that there might be some announcements in the coming days here.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Figueroa Cole.
I don't have a question, but just a comment. This is just a reflection. Again, when we talk about the city values, this is a reflection on a positive direction to move. And I'm sure that there's people from the county paying attention to what we're doing here at the city. And I hope that they can see how much commonality are in our budget towards their budgets, and for them to really take serious the idea of collaborating fully with the city in order to serve this community the best way possible. So again, to Joe Parisi, and the county supervisors, there's another resolution going on their books to really examine that and find ways to join forces so we can maximize the resources that we currently have. Thank you for all the work, you guys. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Alder. Are there any questions? Any other questions for community development? All right, seeing none. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Economic development is next.
Good evening, everyone. Our major changes for the 2022 economic development capital budget include an increase in funding for the Healthy Retail Access Program. This is the program that we use to assist food retailers with making capital investments, technical assistance, and other support to help increase the access of food throughout the community. We continue the Small Business Equity and Recovery Program. However, as noted at previous Finance Committee meetings, funding in 2022 will utilize ARPA support rather than GO borrowing. We add additional funding to TID 46, the Research Park TID, to assist with ongoing private development projects at UW Research Park. We provide funding in TID 49, Femrite Drive, to assist the industrial project that was approved by the council at your last meeting. And we also provide funding within the 2022 budget to begin work on both a South Madison TID district and a new State Street TID district. And with that, can go to the next slide. The mayor's proposed 2022 capital budget for economic development really provides a balanced approach to our work. First, we have several programs related to small business development with an equity focus. So this is the Small Business Equity and Recovery Program, the Co-op Enterprise Development Program, as well as the Healthy Retail Access Program. We also have several initiatives to help grow our tax base and support primary sector employment. And those include the Research Park and Femrite Drive TIDs. And finally, we're proposing key investments in targeted neighborhoods throughout the community, in particular through the South Madison TID, State Street TID, and our land banking program. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Thank you, Matt. Are there questions for economic development? Alder Verveer.
Thank you, Mayor. And I appreciate you too, Matt, that your division likewise has a very robust program going. And I want to extend appreciation to you and all of your colleagues in EDD as I did to Jim and his colleagues in CDD. It's kind of too bad a global pandemic required such an infusion of resources to provide the work that you and just like the work that CDD does. I do have a couple of questions. Why don't I start with State Street proposed TID? Could you share with us, as of this evening, what your work plan is as to the timing of when we will begin the conversation about the creation of that TID, including, of course, the boundaries and project plan?
Sure. I think the majority of the work for the creation of the TID will occur next year, although I anticipate this fall we'll start having some early discussions around where the TID boundary would be, whether we want a single TID or multiple TIDs, whether or not we should go the direction of blighted versus mixed use. We've had, over the past couple of months, as you've likely seen on council agendas, we've had a number of TID requests and TID project plan and boundary amendments that have gone through the council. And so we're at a point now where we're sort of finishing up most of our 2021 work plan, TID work plan. And as we work to kind of finalize the paperwork for that 2021 work, we'll now pivot to 2022. So we'll probably start having some of those conversations again this fall, but work on it in earnest in 2022. By way of reminder, within the year that a TID is set up, it is automatically in place retroactive back to January 1 of that year. So if this TID district is officially set up in the spring, it's technically retroactively in effect back to January 1. So we will have the full year of 2022 to potentially do some work that could be reimbursed by the TID, assuming the Council and Joint Review Board agree to set up that TID.
Thank you. But under all scenarios, you do believe, as the executive capital budget proposes, that a new state, at least one new State Street TID would be created in 2022.
Yes.
Yeah. Very good. And then speaking of that, of course, I think everybody in this meeting knows that under pretty much every scenario, new replacement for the Lake Street side of the State Street campus, parking garage, and that intercity bus terminal that was mentioned at the outset of our meeting, our agenda item here for the capital budget tonight, likely could not proceed without TIF support. You would agree with that statement?
Yes.
Yeah. So with that said, and I realize that the current RFP process to choose a private development partner for that project is a joint operation between your division and the planning division. I'm wondering if you, and obviously the parking utility that we'll be hearing from tomorrow night in terms of their facility, and the transportation department in terms of the intercity bus operations and so forth. But anyway, with all that said, could you give us a quick update as to where we are time-wise now that we've had such a strong interest from the private development community in partnering with us on that site, where the staff team review process is, and when our committee here might receive a briefing on that next?
Sure. As you indicated, it was a very strong showing on the part of the development community with interest in the property. Having received 7 proposals, it is taking a little longer than we originally anticipated to review all of them. But we do believe, likely at one of your October Finance Committee meetings, that we will be in a position to provide at least an initial briefing as to our initial review and where we're heading in terms of a recommendation, to start to have the conversation with the Finance Committee about how the committee would like to proceed. So most likely at one of your October meetings, we will have an initial report and discussion.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And then one last TID question, if I might, and that is you know, we've had conversations about amending TID 45, the Capitol Square West TIF district as well. And I wanted to ask you again, just for an update in terms of your staff's work plan for the new year. Does that work plan still also include potential amendment to the TID 45 boundaries?
Yes, definitely. We are currently in the process of completing a blight study for properties in the Wilson Street corridor that could be added to that TID. And as that's a blighted TID, we need to demonstrate that at least half of the new properties added are considered blighted. Once that blight study is completed, we can proceed with the amendment. And given the time of year, it would be an amendment that would be in effect as of January 1 of 2022.
Very good. And obviously it was breaking news on Friday that there might be a likely parcel that would certainly qualify given the unfortunate structural condition of a certain building adjacent to this existing TID.
Yes, and that is within our study area. And yes, it likely will be declared blighted, would be my guess.
Very good. And then just very lastly, globally under the SBER umbrella and so forth, can you just confirm for all of us, Matt, that the existing variety of grant programs that your division administers, in your estimation, do have sufficient funding planned for the next fiscal year in the executive capital budget?
Yes. $2 million is included in the budget, and that's a very healthy balance for us to proceed with what we would like to accomplish next year.
Very good. Thanks very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Alder. President Abbas.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Matt, for the presentation. One quick question, similar question to Alder Verveer about an update on Oscar Mayer and the future TID.
Sure. We continue to be in contact with the Rice-Rabin team regarding their plans, and it's from the timing of when one implements a TID is kind of a bit of a science, because you don't want to necessarily implement the TID too early, because then you lose some of the power that it has through its lifespan, because under state law, TIDs are limited as to how long they can be in existence. And so we continue to work with the Rice-Rabin team on identifying when is the best year to have a TID in place. It's very possible that in 2022, we will start work on a possible Oscar Mayer TID district that maybe wouldn't be implemented until January 1 of 23. In other words, the funding that is included in the executive budget focuses on funding that we anticipate needing in 2022. But especially in the case of tax increment finance districts, it doesn't preclude us to begin working on them in anticipation of implementing. So it's very possible, even though that TID doesn't appear in the executive budget, it's very possible that we could start working with the Rice-Rabin team on putting a project plan together and possibly launching it then as of January 1 of 23.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Figueroa Cole.
Hi, Matt. Thank you so much for the presentation. Can you explain a little bit what are the cooperative enterprise development economic and opportunity project? Is that what was used to train the people for the open market things that related to it?
Sure, I'm happy to, Alder. So I think the question was basically talk about the co-op enterprise development program.
Yeah.
And this is a program that the city's had in place for, I think, about 5 years now. And the focus of the program is to assist with the development of business cooperatives. And so these are businesses that are owned cooperatively. And what we mean by that is businesses where the actual ownership and the decision-making is by the employees. So it's somewhat different than a consumer co-op where, for example, a credit union or Willie Street co-op, it's the consumers have an ownership stake, but the actual day-to-day operations is by a board. Business cooperatives, the employees actually are the board. They're the individuals running the business. And so this is a great way to build wealth within the community and maintain wealth within the community. And both in terms of new cooperatives, business cooperatives being developed, and also what's called a co-op conversion, where you take an existing for-profit business that had a single owner and transition it to employee ownership. And so what we've been doing through this program is several things. One is that we've been providing direct grants to entrepreneurs that are interested in either forming a new business cooperative as their ownership structure, or businesses interested in a co-op conversion. We've also partnered with Madison Development Corporation to set up a loan fund to assist these business cooperatives as they grow. We have also had a variety of technical assistance, just kind of getting the word out in the community about what business cooperatives are and how they're formed. So we've been partnering with the Madison Cooperative Development Coalition, as well as UW Center for Cooperatives, and many other organizations throughout the community, and just educating individuals about this form of business ownership and the benefits and how one would set up these types of businesses. So a variety of different efforts related to business cooperatives.
Thank you. Thank you for the explanation. That's all I got.
Thank you, Alder. Are there any other questions for economic development? All right. Thank you, Matt. Is that it, Dave?
That's it for this evening, Mayor. A full agenda tomorrow, though.
All right. Well then, having reached the end of our presentations for tonight, we have a motion to refer the capital budget to tomorrow's meeting. Is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor of referral? Seeing no objection, that item will be referred, and that is the end of our agenda. So I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move adjournment.
Second. Everybody want to go.
I'm going to let Dave figure out who moved and who seconded, but I definitely heard a motion in a second, and so we'll take it. Is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote in favor of adjournment? Seeing no objection, we are adjourned. Thank you all. Have a good night.